So here's the question I wanna ask folks today, because I was listening. I'll tell the full story, Anthony, of how this came about. So my friend Zoe, my dear sweet friend Zoe, who is a huge Philly sports fan. She's one of Rachel's good friends from when they were both living in Philadelphia, and she just sent me an unhinged Philly sports fan voice note in our group chat about Jason Kelce. I might actually try to pull that and send it to you for real things, because I feel like she captured a lot of what Philly fans are feeling today, which is somehow they stared at a light coming at them of Jason Kelce's retirement, knowing that it was a train, and they just stared at it and hoped it was something else, and then watched as the emotions of the moment ran them over. And so she's like, you should listen to sports talk radio in Philly right now. It's going nuts. So I flipped on the Odyssey app and flipped up our sister station, WIP, and their midday show was doing a great job of covering it, mixing in their own thoughts and a lot of emotional Eagles fans. And I don't say this like mockingly or anything. Like, I say this genuinely. It was like you had people crying on the radio about how much Jason Kelce means to them. And if you somehow missed the news, Jason Kelce, Eagles all-pro center, one of the best centers to ever play in the league, retired today after 13 years. Not surprising at all. I think certainly expected after last season. For them, obviously a tremendous bummer on how that season ended, about as bad as you can go after a 10-1 start. And Kelce, super emotional and had beautiful things to say about the relationship with his brother, his relationship with the city, the night and the night he met his wife, and kind of that the way that their relationship has made him better, and as he said beautifully, like every accolade I've had in my life has come since I've met her, and she's made me the person and player I have, and created this life that, like, I'm ready to retire because life off the field is more fulfilling than life on it, and I want to spend more time off the field. So there's all kinds of stuff, but he connected with the city in such a way that you have people literally calling in crying about the starting center on their football team retiring. It's nuts. And so naturally, from where I sit as someone who hosts a show like that, where people can call in and share opinions and thoughts and feelings, I was thinking, like, who is the athlete in DC where we have that show, where we stop everything else, where we say the only topic that matters today is athlete X retires, and we open up the phones and we literally can't take everybody because it is overflowing with people who are telling us how much that athlete means to them. And I'm going to say something that might make people mad, but I want you to hear me out, because this is going to be a caveated statement. I do not think that DC has one. And I do not think we've had one in a long, long time. I don't know that we've had one literally in my lifetime. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't a large swath of people listening who don't have that athlete. And the person who most of you, based off my Twitter replies and putting this topic out there, and my own thoughts and talking to a few people around the building today, the person who is closest for sure is Alex Ovechkin. And Ovi is one of the 10 best, if not 5 best, if not 3 best players in the history of the sport. He has been loyal to DC his entire career. He brought this city a championship. I try to think back, because I'm not a big hockey guy. So for me, it's not as emotional with Ovechkin, but certainly I've talked about this tons over the years. One of my favorite nights of my career is the night they won. And I wasn't in Vegas, but I was here. I was at Capital One Arena. I was at the watch party, and then interviewing people and watching grown men cry, interviewing grown men crying on the street, and just the unmitigated joy. And if that wasn't my favorite night of my career, then the parade day was magical. And Ovi was the one more responsible for that day than anyone else. But I think by nature of him being a hockey player, there's just a large portion of the city that isn't as emotionally invested compared to an Eagles player in Philadelphia and compared to what a Commanders player would be here. I think by nature of the question of like, does DC have a Jason Kelce? The answer has to be someone who wore or is wearing burgundy and gold. Because in terms of scope, in terms of the number of people that would care, that kind of is a requirement. That doesn't mean that when we turn around this question in a second and open up the phones and I ask you who's the athlete that would make you call in tears thinking about their retirement, or if you witnessed it, that doesn't mean that Ovechkin's a wrong answer. I'm not trying to pull away anyone's emotional tie to Ovi or anybody else who might come up. I'm just saying, I think trying to put Ovi on the same scale as Kelce is hard because NHL to NFL, it's nothing to do with either man. It's just not a comparison. The one that is, I think, a comparison, why I think Kelce is so incredibly unique, is the connection he has with the city. And here's where a guy like Ovechkin, he's not like the pillar of the community that Jason Kelce is. Ovi's not from this country. In fact, the country he's from comes with a lot of complications. And thus ingratiating himself in the DC community is not as simple and straightforward for, say, Jason Kelce in Philadelphia. But I think when you look at like Kelce marrying Kylie, for instance, his wife, who is a Philadelphia girl through and through, refuses to wear other NFL team jerseys, even when at the Super Bowl supporting her brother-in-law and Travis, when the Eagles aren't playing, like her presence adds to this. That's not Ovi's fault or anybody else that you can think of here's fault. It just is kind of this legendary thing that is rare to any city, any athlete that Kelce struck a chord with in Philadelphia. And I think the last part of it is, like, he's a Hall of Fame player that won a championship, broke a streak for them in Philadelphia with the Eagles. They had not won one. That he breaks that. He's a part of that team. He gives this incredibly memorable speech. So it's like the moments, the greatness, the loyalty, the personality fitting with the city. And then, of course, all of that was true before 2 years ago when he started his podcast gets magnified by the success of the podcast. And that success is then just ballooned out of control because his brother, the co-host of the podcast, starts dating the world's most famous pop star. And that actually creates all of these moments that we've seen over the last couple of months with Jason of technically post-retirement. I mean, I guess not technically post-retirement, but after he's played his final game, the shirts off in Buffalo, the beer chugging, all of these things, the night out and the mask after the Super Bowl that just add to the legend that is. So part of this is far beyond Philadelphia, but it so perfectly fits with the character of that city that it ingrains him and ingratiates him there in a way that I truly don't even know what that looks like in D.C., a city with this much diversity. Because I will say this, the guy that immediately popped to mind for me outside of Ovi as someone who had things gone differently over the back half of their career was John Wall. And I think there's a lot of people that be like, John Wall doesn't identify with me at all because they're more suburban or this or that, or they're not huge basketball fans. And then there's other people who are like, yes, John Wall is my guy. And they're like, Alex Ovechkin doesn't do anything for me. And it seems like the city of Philadelphia is a little more homogenous as a sports culture than what D.C. is. So maybe it's not even possible in D.C. But that's why I do think the size scope argument, you wind up with just someone with the Commanders, because that seems to be the team that touches all parts of this city in the sporting culture in a way that the Nats, Caps, Wizards, Mystics, Spirit, DC United, etc. just cannot. But that's the nature of the NFL. It's king. So that then begs the question, not like who is DC's Jason Kelce, because for all the reasons laid out, I don't know if there is one. I am curious, especially for some of our older listeners. Apologies to call you out here, but for some of you who are around for the glory days of the burgundy and gold, is there a player that you feel like was DC's Jason Kelce? You got to go back to those title teams. Who was that guy? But more importantly, I think now on the phones, and we're going to hit this topic a ton throughout the show because we got JI Halsell joining us at 4:30, but we'll take calls next. Who is the athlete in DC sports that if they retired, they'd make you cry? That's what I want to know next. 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. I actually have a fun YouTube announcement later on in the show, so we'll hit that. I think, Anthony, when are we playing Take Command today? Is that 5:30, 6 o'clock?
5:30, yeah, somewhere around there.
I think it's 5:30.
Yep.
That wasn't like me trying to move around the rundown. That's me trying to remember the rundown.
Oh, yeah, 5:30.
5:30. Fun YouTube announcement, 5:30 today, around Take Command. So that'll coming up in a little bit. But right now on the phones, on the Team 980 listener line, we are asking you this question on the heels of Jason Kelce's retirement today. Who is the DC athlete that when they retire, it will make you cry? Got some great feedback on Twitter already at Craig Hoffman, but let's go to the phones, 301-230-0980. Let's start with Keston. Keston, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman
Hey, thank
Show.
you. Hey, thank you. First-time caller, though.
Thanks for calling in. Who's the athlete for you that either did or would make you cry when they retired?
So I have actually two picks, but my number one pick will be London Fletcher.
That's a great one. That's actually a really good
Yeah,
call.
yeah. So I will give you a brief breakdown. I started watching football since RG3. He brought me to the sport. I was more into soccer. But since RG3, I've never missed a game watching Redskins, watching Commanders. And London Fletcher stuck out to me as that person who grounded the team. So I would say compatible with Kelsey, I think London Fletcher was our guy. But as of recent, we don't have anyone that has had that longevity and the team had that much success. So we don't have that right now, but I'll say London Fletcher.
That is a phenomenal call. And I can't believe I didn't think of Fletch myself. Of all the names that I thought of and was thinking back to some of those teams, like Fletch didn't necessarily cross my mind. And it's interesting now because Fletch has emerged as a media personality. He's doing the game day broadcast. I think when you compare like Fletch to Kelce, Fletch obviously trying to get into the Hall of Fame, absolutely belongs there. Crazy that he's not in, but that this is what happens with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. There's always backlogs, and guys who are deserving are always waiting to get in. But Fletch is a guy that was an essential leader in this team. I think the difference is, and why that probably doesn't resonate as much with as many fans as, say, Kelce does, is Kelce won the title. And that title makes all the difference. Kelce also played his entire career in Philly, where Fletch started in St. Louis with the Rams, and his ring came when he was part of that Greatest Show on Turf team. So Fletch is a phenomenal call, though, kind of that, like the caller said, like Keston said, like being a grounding force, being a leader, being a centering force, even if you're not always the biggest star on the team, a la Fletch was with Cooley, with Portis, with Santana. I do think that Kelce kind of wound up, eyeing this incredibly thin needle that he was both. He was wound up by the very end of his career, somehow as the center, being the biggest name on the team. So he was like the heart, the soul, and the face. And that's very, very difficult to do. But I think Fletch, like if you're a football fan who cried when London Fletcher retired, that tells me you know ball. And I got respect for that. Let's go to Lap. Lap, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show. Who's the DC athlete that when you think of their career, it makes you cry?
What's up, Craig? Shout out to Southeast Ant, putting me on. Hey, I'm gonna say John Wall, man. I'm a diehard John Wall fan, man, and I'm just hoping that he gets another opportunity, man. I was looking at some highlights on YouTube the other day, man, and I don't think people realize how good and how impactful and how much he meant on and off the court. You know what I'm saying? For this area, DC in his blood. His dad was from here, and anybody that grew up in DC. You know what I'm saying? I always got family in Carolina, too, so he got the best of both, just like I have, my childhood growing up. So I'm hoping, man, some of these contenders or somebody, man, can give him an opportunity to play, man, at least come off the bench, because I know one of those Clippers games before he got traded, he had 15 assists, and that was off the bench. So some of this garbage I'm seeing for some of these players to come off the bench, I know John Wall can play and contribute. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I don't know
I'm
about
thinking the Lakers.
I don't know Lab about where John is now as a basketball player, but I do think that the connection to the city part, like I will say this, in my time in DC, there has not been an athlete that I associate the phrase connecting with the city like John Wall. Like the peak, this is my city moment of my DC sports journalism career, which is 2015 and on. It's when I got here, right? So I don't call up and say, well, what about RG3 in 2012? I wasn't here yet. 2015 and on, the guy was John. And that moment where he hits the shot, I was in the building at Cap One when he hit the shot and jumped on the table. And I was like, this is my freaking city. And that moment, he could not have been more correct. Wish Game 7 would have went differently. The Kelly Olynyk game seemed to ruin a lot. And what we didn't realize at the time was that was the end of John Wall's ascent. That was the highest point he'd ever have as an NBA player. And had he continued to ascend, or at least had maintained that level, where maybe the next year the playoffs bounce differently and he and Brad get to the conference finals. Like, things are looked at differently here. But because of the way it ended, where there's a ton of fault on the organization, but also fault on John, it winds up being different. And now John, I just found out he's doing a podcast the other day. And it's like he never, like, there's not a moment where he gets his retirement. And I think that's another thing that's kind of magical about Kelce in all of this, in terms of the story, is Jason is retiring when it was a legitimate question, because even though like he was in pain this year and he's battling through a bunch of stuff, and he made it pretty clear. Like, I would highly recommend anyone who's a sports fan to watch the Kelce documentary on Amazon and how grueling the decision was for him last year and what he has to go through to get ready to play. Like, of course he's retiring, but also he still could be an all-pro next year. He's that good. And being able to retire at the top, like, that is so rare for athletes, to be able to have that moment where you are recognized without some of the feelings that we have at the end of many athletic careers, where guys have fallen off and the appreciation tour is like, thank God dude's hanging it up, because it's not quite what it used to be. But to see someone go out truly at the top, where it also, because that's the thing, right? It has to be both. Like, the perfect ending is that you go out where we don't feel shorted. It's not Barry Sanders. It's not Calvin Johnson, where they go out at the top because they retire before we feel like they're supposed to, where there's clearly gas left in the tank. It's to retire at the top when it's like, damn, I can't believe they got to the end. There's not a whole lot of gas left, and I respect them for not finding out that actually the tank was empty because they retired 1 year too late versus what feels like right on time. And I don't know that we've had that moment either. And so some of the names that come up, the Ryan Zimmermans, obviously Ovechkin is chasing a record right now, but we know he's not the same player that he was. And I think also the fact that the Capitals are not that good is having a huge impact on this. How we feel about guys going out at the top depends on how the team is doing. And so in many ways, us not having this athlete that we can compare to a guy like Kelce here in D.C. is based off the fact that the teams haven't been that good, or not as good as we think they should have been. If you have Ovechkin, should you have more than one cup? Like, that is a conversation. I think if Bryce Harper stays and wins multiple World Series, like, he could be a guy. I will say there is one answer that I've gotten that I feel has hit the spot in a way for me emotionally that is different, because a guy like Ovechkin's a star among stars. He's one of the best ever. Jason Kelce's a center, so there's also this kind of weird, he's so out over his skis in terms of fame compared to what his positional fame should be. Tom Wilson is a phenomenal hockey player. But we know why Tom Wilson is beloved in D.C. And it's his role as the enforcer. It's being the heart and soul of the team. And even though, first line Tommy eventually became a thing, it's like, nah, this dude's a first line NHL hockey player. He was beloved because of what he represented. And he's always going to be more DC famous than he is national famous. And in a way, that's kind of pulls at the emotional heartstrings in a way that's different too. So I got one tweet with Tom Wilson. That's a name I love for this conversation, even though obviously Ovechkin, Backstrom, Oshie, who's another one that I really like for this conversation as well. Those guys are all better and more important players. Although I'm sure some people would say the heart and soul element that Tom Wilson maybe was as important as anybody, and obviously is the enforcer and the guy who kind of kept Ovechkin safe over the years. Not that Ovi's lacking in toughness, but the guy who did the dirty work is essential to anyone to winning a Stanley Cup. So, food for thought. We'll come back to it a little bit later, but next, let's bring in someone to do some math. JI Halsell is going to join the show, NFL salary cap expert and NFL agent, on what it meant for the Commanders to cut Charles Leno, Logan Thomas, Nick Gates, going to get the paperwork as well, and what do they do now in free agency. That is next on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We are on the Team 980. We're always streaming live on the free Odyssey app and on YouTube at the Team 980. But if somehow you can't catch us live, you got life. These things happen. Check out the Hoffman Show podcast. It's on demand anytime, anywhere. I definitely remember growing up listening to my favorite radio show, making sure I never missed. And I'll even tell you what it was. It was SVP and Rosillo, Van Pelt. If you're out there driving around, getting ready for SportsCenter tonight, I used to listen to your show. Walking through the campus of MTSU, you and Rosillo, I listen in between classes, and that's how I caught up. So I've been doing that for a decade. It's a great way. If you can't catch us every single day, that you still want the show, catch it in full on the podcast feed. Right now, we have a perfect guest to react to breaking news here at the Team 980.
Breaking news. Oh, snap. News is broken. Breaking news.
The Broncos have informed Russell Wilson that he is going to be released when the league year starts on March 13th. And get ready for this, Anthony. Do you know how much money in dead cap the Denver Broncos are going to be taking on to do this?
If they cut him right now, $33 million.
No.
Too much?
Not even half.
Not even half.
That's right. It's $85 million. That is
a
record
gosh.
amount of dead money. It is so much of a record, in fact, that it is more than the previous two top spots combined. For more on that, JI Halsell, NFL salary cap expert, joins us now. JI, what's up, man? It was great to see you. I wish I got to see you for more than trying to get you into Radio Row in Indy. The security extra tight there, but a pleasure to have you today. How do you make sense of $85 million of dead cap money?
No, I mean, look, quarterback contracts are expensive. I was telling Anthony, before we jumped on that at a point the compensation has to match the player's compensation. And when you talk about a big money quarterback contract, you end up with an outcome like this where you've got a player who's no longer on your roster counting $85 million against the cap. It's one of those things where, though, had he continued to be on the roster beyond the conversion date, they would actually continue to owe him even more guaranteed money. So there's not a great solution if you're the Denver Broncos, and for Russell Wilson, those checks are coming in regardless. So you can go sign for the league minimum of $1.2 million elsewhere, and go become a starting quarterback. And for his new team, $1 million for a competent, albeit kind of on the back end of his career, starting quarterback makes some sense.
No doubt. I mean, he's 26 touchdowns, 8 picks last year, which statistically, obviously doesn't tell the entire story, but that's one of the best Washington quarterback seasons in a long time, 26-8.
Right.
And that got him cut. Obviously, he and Sean Payton do not get along at all. If you're the Broncos now and you have that much dead cap space, what does that mean for them trying to build a roster around that gigantic number of dollars that is not available?
Yeah, no, you're likely gonna go see a rookie quarterback there in Denver. They're not gonna be in the Kirk Cousins market, if you will. They're not gonna be in the Justin Fields market even, because even if you're the Broncos and you're Justin Fields, he's on the back end of his first round contract. He's gonna have to make a decision on his fifth-year option. So you're going to look for the J.J. McCarthys of the world to potentially be the starter in Denver this coming season.
So I heard out in Indy that Sean Payton is an enormous fan of Drake May. To get Drake May, the Broncos would have to trade up, likely with Washington, to the number 2 pick. Is that something they can afford to do, though? Can they afford to give up rookie salary spots to come up in the draft, or are they going to have to settle with whoever is available for them at 12, which is their current draft spot?
If they truly love a player, whether it's Drake May or any other player, or any other quarterback for that matter, you can do it. It just, whatever draft assets you have to give up to make that move, makes it that much more incumbent upon you to hit on the remaining picks that you do have. It makes it that much more incumbent upon you to get guys in college free agency right after the draft who do not get drafted, who are going to be contributors. So, yes, the Russell dead money is a hindrance. Trading up could be a hindrance, but it's not impossible to overcome as you build out a roster.
Yeah, Sean Payton is relying on his own talents as a coach. And look, he turned him around last year, but we'll see. Crazy kind of breaking news. I mean, expected, but nuts to see it actually come through the wire from out in Denver. JI Halsell is our guest. Of course, NFL salary cap analyst, NFL agent, knows the cap as well as anybody, and has been covering Washington's cap situation for a long time as an analyst for us here on the Team 980. So the news that we originally were going to have you on to talk about, JI, is what broke Friday during our show. Charles Leno out, Logan Thomas out. We've also heard since that Nick Gates is eventually going to get released as well. Is there any of these contracts and moves that stand out to you for any particular reason?
Not really. I mean, Charles Leno was 2024 was the last year of his deal. So as you look to retool your offensive line in its entirety, moving on from a 32-year-old left tackle who's going to count $15.5 million against the cap and $12 million in cash, as you turn the page, makes sense. Same thing with Nick Gates, not signed by the current front office regime, and it just kind of, with those two moves in particular, really tell you that beyond the quarterback decision, they're going to definitely do a lot of retooling of the offensive line this offseason, as they should.
One thing that really also stood out to me about Leno and Thomas specifically is those are two guys that kind of spoke up about what was going down with Bieniemy last year. Yeah. And I also wonder how much of that has to do with them kind of bringing in their own leadership. Like, I don't know how much, look, everyone hears stuff, especially when you're out in Indy and especially if you're in that agent world, which you are a part of. So I don't know what you know versus kind of what you could hypothesize based off of that. Like, do you think these are sheer math moves, or is there a little bit more three-dimensional chess you think happening with the choices, especially a guy like Thomas who, was productive when he was healthy last year, and they don't have anything else in the tight end room. And by the way, they have a ton of cap space, so it's not like they need it.
Right. No, I mean, there are multiple variables, right? And again, new regime, trying to instill a new culture. Both of these players are well above 30 years old. Logan Thomas was also 32, just like Charles Leno. Particularly when you think about the tight end position, even though, there's not a lot on the roster there. You got some young guys who you've drafted in the past few years. But in the grand scheme of roster building, it's not one of those, really important positions that you can't go find a productive guy in the middle part of the draft, or even a fairly cost-efficient option in free agency. So, again, I think this is just really a bigger part of just retooling the roster, retooling the culture, and, getting rid of guys who are 32-plus years old.
J.I. Halsell, salary cap analyst, NFL agent, with us here on the Hoffman Show. I think some of the comments that kind of came out of the week from Adam Peters and Dan Quinn were interesting about they don't really anticipate themselves being huge spenders in free agency. They have like $100 million of cap space now. They've got to spend a lot of it to hit the salary floor. So when you hear a GM and a head coach say stuff like that this time of year, and know these guys the way that you've seen them work in the past, like, what does that mean to you? Like, what are some of the moves that you anticipate Washington exploring as free agency opens the legal tampering period a week from today?
Yeah, I think your core tenet of roster building is to build through the draft because, quite frankly, the labor is cheap, right? And then to supplement what you do in the draft in terms of your roster building, you then supplement that through free agency. And so that means you take a very targeted approach at free agency. So, the days of Washington just spending tons and tons of money in free agency are long gone. It's been proven that you can build championship teams through the draft, through hitting on day 3 picks, through using college free agents. Now, at premium positions like edge, where you have to go get a pass rusher because you've got to be able to rush the passer in today's NFL. Maybe did you take a home run swing at a guy? Sure, but that's a targeted approach because ideally you would love to use those cap dollars to reward your homegrown players. And if you don't feel like you have a lot of homegrown players today who you can reward with that, well, you just roll the money over to the next league year, and then as you develop those homegrown players, you reward them accordingly.
JI Halsell, salary cap analyst, NFL agent with us here on the Hoffman Show. JI, the insight, fantastic as always. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon as the Commanders spend some of that money, and we like to understand how these contracts work and fit into the larger puzzle. Appreciate you, man, and we'll have you back probably, if we're being honest, next week.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, you got it. That's JI Halsell with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, we've been telling you for months, really, I'm training for this thing, this big race, that race, that hell race, as Anthony has looked at me like, what are you doing, you crazy man? That was this weekend. So tell you about it. Give you all the inside scoop. Next is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. it was a great weekend. And it was hard. It was also, I will say, frustrating. If you follow me on Instagram, Rachel unfortunately sprained her ankle last Wednesday, and so the race didn't go like it was more complicated, I think, than we wanted it to be. But at the end of the day, like it was a really great time, and I'm really thrilled that we got the chance to do that, and all that training paid off. But there was it was just cool. That's the shortest version of it. I'll let you ask me questions for the longer versions. I guess I can take you through some of it too, but yeah, what you got?
I was about to say, what was the hardest part?
The hardest part, no doubt, was the lunges. So I guess I should rewind. If you haven't heard us talk about this before, the race is called Hyrox, and it is a hybrid race. So it was a race where there is some running, and there is also some what's it called? Some like stations. So there's 8 stations and then a whole bunch of running. The stations are a sled push and pull. There's a ski erg as well. There is a row, like a row erg. There is what else? The lunges. There's a farmer's carry. It's a whole bunch of just really hard, really intense fitness stuff that you do, and then you run 1,000 meters, and then you do something else that is very hard and very intense. And then you run 1,000 meters, and then you do something else that is very hard and very intense. And the order of those hard and intense events is the ski erg first, and then you run, and then you do a sled push, and then you run, and sled pull, and then you run, then 80 meters of burpee broad jumps, and then you run, and then 1,000-meter row, and then the farmer's carry, and then is the lunges, and then you finish with 100 wall balls. And Station 7, the lunges, was, I cannot stress this enough, awful. One, that is the station where Rachel's ankle really started to hurt for her. So she was hurting, and like obviously there's only so many she could do where she's like, I am dying. Like I can't believe how she gutted it out. She's so freaking tough. Like she gritted that thing out. But it got to a point where she's like, I can't do another lunge. She told me after the race. I did not know this during because of how freaking much she gutted this out. But like, she's like, I did not want to get up out of the last lunge. And the only reason I got up is so I could give you the sandbag. Because you have like a sandbag, a 45-pound sandbag on your back.
Good gracious, man.
Yeah, so she's a freaking champ. And of course, we're doing it at the DC Convention Center running on concrete, which isn't exactly good for a sprained ankle or for good feet and
or
ankles.
Your knees or anything else.
Not ideal. But the lunges, you've done so much at that point, and you don't have legs, and you just have to lunge for like 100 meters. And so I probably did like 30-ish meters to start, and then she gave me a little bit of relief, and then I went back in, and then we kind of alternated from there. But yeah, the lunges, by far the worst.
Oh my God. All right, what was the easiest part of it?
Honestly,
gotta be some easy.
As crazy as it sounds.
Nothing was easy.
No, as crazy as it sounds, the wall balls at the end, which I'd been told were going to be terrible, weren't that bad. And I think it's in part because we got very, very good at them. We just did so freaking many of them in training that we could like split them. And also like at that point you can empty the tank because there's nothing left.
Nothing else.
Like there's not a run after it, right? It's run station. So you finish the wall balls and you run across the finish line.
Yep.
And so I got there, I did like 25 in a row. So I knocked out a quarter of them, and then we, shifted from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was honestly probably the easiest station. The sleds actually weren't nearly as bad as I thought. We had kind of been warned.
Were you pulling them or you were pushing them?
Both. And the reason why is because like we had trained on a heavier sled.
Okay, so
than the one that we wound up using, in part because previously, like Hyrox is a pretty young sport, so they're still kind of finding, I don't want to say finding themselves, but they're still like, there's some stuff that's not quite as consistent. And so I had been told that, like, hey, it's going to depend on the carpet and the sleds. And they finally, I think, standardized it across all their races. They signed like a sponsorship deal. And so the one that they got is like not terrible. It's hard. It's very heavy, but it's not as bad as the one we've been training on because we had been basically preparing for the worst. And so the sled push and pull was like, I hit the first sled and was like, oh, I can, like, this isn't, I'm not going to die.
Yeah.
Which is great because that's the second and third event. And if you wear yourselves out on the sled, you're just screwed for the rest of the thing. So I would say those weren't terrible.
And what advice would you have for somebody aspiring to,
Oh, that's a good
do
question.
one of these? Because
that's a good question.
You're surely, I'm joking, I'm not going to do it. That's too much for me.
I think we should get you in a relay.
Oh my gosh, Greg. That's too much pressure.
I think we should, no, we'd have to find the fourth. If it was me, you, and Rachel, and then we need a fourth.
I
But,
would really have to do some serious training.
Well, so here's how the singles is you do the whole thing yourself,
Okay.
right? Obviously. Doubles and doubles, you do all the running together, and then you split the stations, which is what Rachel and I did. Relay, there's 8 stations.
Mm-hmm.
You pick 2 each. So you have 4 people, you each do 2, and you do the run in the station, and then you rest. You tag in a teammate. So you'd only have to do a quarter of the event.
Oh.
And I think we could find 2 stations where you could be good. Like you'd run a fast 1K, you'd do the station.
Yep.
And then bang.
All right. I might be interested.
All right.
But where's the advice also?
The advice would be go to someone who knows what they're doing for training. So there's some people that went to the right places for training and they did really well.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that didn't go to the right places for training. They didn't do as well. So I can give more training advice on this, but my advice would actually be like that's a different show.
Yeah.
Plus we're out of time and Michael Phillips is joining us next. But go to someone who's an expert. Just so happens to be that I train with the best experts maybe in the country.
Yep.
And that's a good time. Michael Phillips is going to join us next. He's not going to talk about Hyrox. He's going to talk about the Commanders and where they are after this NFL Combine 2024 has come to a close. And, of course, the news of the weekend in terms of some of the comings and goings of free agency. We'll also get his take on our question of the day. Is there a DC athlete that can make you cry upon retiring the way Jason Kelce sent the entire city of brotherly love into tears? All of that next on The Hoffman Show. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Is this random, Anthony, or just because we're about to welcome one of our best friends on the show?
We got Mike Phillips coming up, of course.
We sure do. It's about that time, on a Monday.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
It is a Monday. There is football news. There is Commanders news. That means we are going to talk to Michael Phillips. Michael, how was your weekend?
Not as good as yours, obviously, in Indianapolis, but I trust you held it down for us.
Yeah, well, Indianapolis, we were just talking about my weekend. Indianapolis was last week. I came back and ran what has been described to me since as a hell race this weekend. We did Hyrox, which is a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, but apparently people think I'm nuts for doing this thing. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I took my kid up to Massanutten Ski Resort. We did snow tubing and all that stuff. It was great because it was like 65 this weekend. But they make the snow, so the snow's still on the ground. So you can just do all that in your T-shirt.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. You go skiing and you don't even need long sleeves. I mean, what a dream. I mean, also kind of a nightmare, but that's a different story.
There are planet implications that I'd rather not think about there.
Sure.
That make the whole thing scarier than it definitely was while we were just having fun.
The graphic that goes around, like the meme that goes around basically year round, where it's like the seasons of weather in DC, and it's like you're in fake spring. Do you know which one of those? Yeah, which one of those are we in? Fake spring one? How many fake springs are there before we can actually be like, oh, let's put away the heavy coat for the winter?
There is traditionally a frost at some point in late March or early April. We have not nipped this thing yet. We are in cherry blossom season, though, I think, or at least we're close. So it feels like cherry blossom season is on the chart somewhere, right?
Yeah, no, that's definitely there. And hopefully cherry blossom season actually aligns with like the Cherry Blossom Festival, because sometimes they're just doing their best. And sometimes they miss it a little bit. And you're like, well, full bloom is scheduled for 3 weeks from now when the trees will be barren because they will have all fallen off already.
Yeah, one of the rough things is they planted the cherry blossoms in the left field at Nats Park, and they're beautiful. But the only people who ever get to see it are the people who come to that, fake game they do before the season with college teams to prep the arena.
Well, what more could you want to go to Nats Park than cherry blossoms? So, that's why I would go to that game. All right, so NFL Combine is in the books. I was indeed there last week in Indianapolis. Had a great time. It's always a good time. May the Combine, as much as Indy is not like the most glamorous place, may it always stay there. You watch the workouts obviously this weekend. You hear all the rumors, the different people. Schefter's all of a sudden saying like, "Oh, Washington's considering everything with that number 2 pick." When you come out of this weekend and kind of pull your head up for air this morning, get off the slopes and start planning your radio show. What was the number one topic for you coming out of this?
Yeah, and poking around, it does sound like they have not made up their mind, right? I don't think that's bluster or, bluffing or trying to get whatever. I'm sure everybody in the building has a preference at this point or has a lean, but I do think it's accurate to say nobody in there, organizationally, they have not made up their mind on what they're going to do. I continue to think that the most logical thing to do or the easiest thing to do will be to turn in the card and take a quarterback at number 2. You got a lot of other moving parts. Would Kirk Cousins come here? Would Russell Wilson come here? Would you trade up to number 1? Would you trade back? I think the thing to remember is I take you back to economics class here, Craig, right? Like,
oh boy.
People value what they have more than what they don't have, right? That's why it's so hard to do deals around these top picks or around these big players, because the value they perceive on the number 2 pick, generally speaking, is higher than the value other teams perceive the number 2 pick to hold. And that's going to be true at number 1, too. Unless Chicago is just dead set, we are absolutely trading this pick, they're probably going to value it more highly than the Commanders are. So I do think inertia will start to take its toll as we move down this road. I think the other thing, and I'm sure we'll dive into it, is the Drake May versus Jaden Daniels dispute, option, whatever you want to call it. I don't think that shows any signs of relenting anytime soon. I think both those guys have real positives. I'm going to give you a super wishy-washy answer of I'm kind of not mad either way.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'm mad either way. I'm finding myself leaning more towards May as the process goes. We'll circle back to that in a second, though. I'll get your lean amidst your wish-wash. But I want to touch on the 2 vets that you mentioned. in part because we obviously get the news today, about an hour ago, that the Broncos have informed Russell Wilson he's going to be released.
Yes.
They're going to take this $85 million in dead cap money. He is still going to get paid bukus of money from the Broncos. And JI Halsell was on with a salary cap expert who goes, look, if Russ wants to, he could very easily take a $1 million veteran minimum deal next year, still get paid out the wazoo from the Broncos, and help his team out to spend a bunch of money elsewhere in free agency. Is that a path that is remotely interesting to you for the Washington Commanders to go after Russell Wilson at that super cheap number, knowing you then have like 80+ million other to spend in cap space and the number 2 pick and 5 top 106, et cetera, et cetera?
I am insanely interested in that road, Craig Hoffman. I am not backing down off this one. Every team should be wildly interested in getting Russell Wilson at that price. You would be crazy not to. Now, we could sort out the rest of it. Should Russell Wilson be interested in being here? What are the long-term implications of that? But honestly, even if you're turning in the card at 2, even if you're going to trade up to 1 and get Caleb Williams, it just makes a ton of sense to have a year of Russell Wilson as a bridge, as a chance for him to prove himself, whatever that is. One of my big things on my show has been, I don't want whoever it is they draft starting 17 games this year. I don't think that's a good idea, given the roster and the way it looks and the talent that's out there in free agency at left tackle and the possibility of starting a rookie from week 1. I think it's just an insanely intriguing possibility. I don't think Russ wants a team like this where he's going to have to do a lot of work. It's maybe a multi-year operation. I think he's a far better fit maybe in a place like Minnesota where it's a little more plug and play. But I mean, I don't know. I think everybody should be interested in Russ right now.
So I think it comes down to this when it comes to Russ. It's like, how much of a weirdo do you think it is? I'm sorry that's indelicate, but like there are plenty of stories about Russell Wilson's unique personality, and there are some of them that are great. He obviously takes his job very, very seriously. There's also some where that seriousness with which he takes his job has rubbed people the wrong way, to say the least. So I think to me, it depends on, especially if you're going to take a quarterback at 2, because I think the idea of Russ starting this year, setting an example for your young quarterback of what it means to be a professional is actually incredibly intriguing, unless that example is actually not the one that you want him to follow, which I think is in the cards in terms of the mixed reviews that Russell Wilson has throughout his career.
Yeah, the last 2 months have been really kind to Russell Wilson in that regard, right? He was the bad guy when he left Seattle, right? If you ask people, like, who's the bad guy? Is it Pete Carroll or Russell Wilson? Everybody would have pointed at Russ's picture. Who's the bad guy in this one? I think it's Sean Payton. I think Sean Payton's the bad guy in this one, and I think he's running Russell Wilson very early in a guaranteed contract. I think he's setting his team back in doing so. I think Sean Payton comes across as the bad guy here, which helps Russ on his redemption tour here. Now, you mentioned the quirks. Those are real, obviously. He's also crazy good at what he does, crazy dedicated, a leader. I don't think he wants to go anywhere where he's not the undisputed number 1 out of the gate. You always hear like, oh, you should back up Rodgers, or, you know what, he should go compete with whoever. I don't think that's his care. Like, I think he operates best when he is the number 1 unquestioned leader in the building, right? And I think he'd get that opportunity in Washington, D.C. if you plugged him in there. So I do think D.C. could offer that. I think that is where you maximize Russ. Obviously, he had his clashes with Sean Payton this year. That wasn't good for anybody. But the other thing is on a short-term deal, you can take your chances. You can cut him if you need to cut him. That's not great for anybody. That ends poorly for everybody. But it's an option. It's on the board.
It is, and I tend to agree with you that this is probably not the place that Russ wants to go. I do think it's a little more intriguing on Cousins if it can be convinced by a guy like Adam Peters that, like, hey, dude, we'll build. What do you want? Like, we'll go get it. We'll go spend money on wide receivers. Plus, we have some. We'll go spend big money on O-line. We'll draft what you want. Do you have any interest in a Kirk Cousins return, which is going to come with a very different price tag? But Washington, of course, has the money.
Yeah, price tags don't matter. I'm pretty nervous about a Kirk Cousins return in terms of time frames, right? I think what Adam Peters communicated on Friday, releasing the guys that he released, was I'm working on a long time frame. Like, I'm working on a 3 to 5 year plan to build this roster and get it right. I don't think Kirk Cousins is working on a 3 to 5 year plan. And frankly, I've got my skepticisms that Kirk Cousins will be as good of a quarterback in 4 years as he was this past year before the injury. I think it's fair to have skepticism about what he'll have to offer this season coming back from the injury. So I'm a little nervous that the time frames, the incentives aren't aligned here, right? And good on Cousins. I'm not mad at all. Dude's got leverage and he's going to use it, right? But he's going, that I'm not putting them in the same level, but it's known as the Tom Brady route now, the Aaron Rodgers route, right? Like, I will come to your team, but it's not just about giving me my money. It's also about, I want this guy and this guy. I want you pushing your chips in with me that we're going to make something happen here. I think Adam Peters would be incredibly reluctant to do that.
No, I agree. I think that's probably the right move for Washington. It's also why I worry about like the long-term repercussions of the leadership stuff with Russ. Even despite the price tag, I'm like, I kind of want the new leadership to emerge quickly and not Russ to be here and be the dominant force in the room for a year. But with Cousins specifically, yeah. And that's also why, like, if I'm him, I look at, like, what do you want? Justin Jefferson? Cool. Back to Minnesota. Because that's what I'd want if I was a quarterback, is to throw to Justin Jefferson. All right. As you mentioned.
I think Minnesota gets a deal done with Kirk. It makes too much sense to me. I do think Atlanta's a player here, but I think he ends up back in Minnesota.
Agreed on all fronts. You did mention is Michael Phillips, of course, MP on the mic, 910 The Fan in Richmond. Daily, you can listen to it on the free Odyssey app, or if you can't listen to it because you have a day job, then you can listen to the the MP on the Mic podcast with Michael, which is just the podcast of said radio show. Bada bing, bada bam. All right, but in terms of the quarterbacks that are more likely to be on this roster, Daniels, May, you mentioned you're kind of wishy-washy, kind of okay on them both, but coming out of the combine and everything you're hearing, do you have a lean one way or the other?
Yeah, well, you heard, right, Drake May dominated the room, was a leader, was all the things they wanted to hear in the interviews, and you heard kind of the opposite on Jane Daniels. He was quiet, he was reserved, deferential, which doesn't mean one's going to be a good quarterback and one's going to be a bad quarterback. I continue to think that with Drake May, the floor is very high. I don't think Drake May is going to bomb out, that he'll be out of the league in a few years or anything like that. I think you get a very steady baseline of production. You can turn on the tape. You can see him make a lot of throws. You can be really impressed. I'm done ranting about people who call him Sam Howell 2.0. If he's Sam Howell 2.0, he's a fully different model. That's not it. That's not what this is here. I like him a lot. I continue to be intrigued by the ceiling on Jaden Daniels. I think he's got a higher ceiling. I think the off-schedule stuff, the way he makes plays, the way he delivers when the chips are down, there's something to that. There's always been something to that. That's something that's always going to intrigue me. I'm a sucker for a high ceiling, Craig. Love a good high ceiling guy. The floor is indisputably lower. But if you're going at 2, what are you there for if not to roll the dice and, see what you can get out of it?
So let me flip this equation on its head for you, because this happened to me last week. We were having a conversation on the show as part of our first annual roundtable with Ben Solak, who brought up the topic of quarterback scrambles, and basically we're this long-winding conversation that is definitely worth everyone's time to listen to, because Ben drops immense amounts of knowledge, as he tends to do, is that we actually have our ceiling and floors backwards with quarterbacks. Because we think about running ability as raising the ceiling and throwing ability as putting a floor underneath you. I actually think it's flipped. I actually think if you are an elite runner like Jaden Daniels, your floor is higher. And how high your ceiling is dependent on how well you can throw the football from the pocket. Whereas a guy like Drake May, it's like, well, if he can't throw it, like, sure, he's mobile, he can run around a little bit, but, like, he's not going to have longevity in the league. So I don't really have a question for you there, Michael. I just think that when we think about low floor, high ceiling, in some ways we get it backwards, because we think of, like, what highlights are possible, and Drake May's not going to have an 85-yard touchdown run, and Jaden Daniels might, and that's unique. But I think it's actually the other way. Like, I think May's ceiling is way higher, because he's actually a good athlete, a good runner, great mobility, and if he can dice you from the pocket, then that dude could be. I mean, some people think he's a potential Hall of Fame candidate. Like, they're great on him as that high.
Yeah, and all of that makes total sense to me. I'd probably throw injuries on the pile too. Jaden Daniels, man, when he gets hit, it looks like a Looney Tunes cartoon. He got arms and legs splattered all over the place, and somebody comes and pries him off the turf. That part scares me a lot on Jaden Daniels, how that will play at the NFL level and how that would play in this city with this team behind this offensive line. I don't think Drake May brings that concern to the table here, right? So I also don't think I have no concern with pairing Drake May and Sam Howell. I don't think that's an issue at all. I think they're being genuine when they talk about being friends and getting along and how that wouldn't be an issue. So I have no issue with turning in the card for either player there. I think just not combine related, but just generally, I'd probably be upset if they turned in the card and it wasn't a quarterback. I think that would be a waste of being at number 2. I get how good Marvin Harrison Jr. is. He's so good he didn't have to participate last week. I get that Joe Alt is an offensive lineman, and there used to be people here who wore pig's noses. That's great. I'm very happy for them. I just think if you're turning in the card at 2, it's either a quarterback or you're trading down. Otherwise, you're not getting the value out of that pick.
Yeah, so I think I agree with you on that part. It just seems like someone better take a quarterback at 2, and if it's not you, you better have gotten 3 first-rounders for it. If that's the case, okay, I'm not that upset about it. But you said something else earlier in that answer that I am starting to sour on a little bit, which is the idea of pairing Drake May and Sam Howell together. I would prefer to have, and maybe prefer is like softening this take here, I would very much like to have a veteran quarterback in the room because I don't really see the point of pairing those two guys together outside of Sam is a fine quality backup. But you can get other quality backups who have more experience in the league and who, by the way, if they happen to start the season for you and are good, don't create this complex problem of what do we do with this other 23-year-old quarterback who's good all of a sudden when we just spent the number 2 overall pick on Drake May. I would prefer to trade Sam Howell and get some value for him and then bring in a less threatening, if you will, veteran, because even if Jacoby Brissett is really good for a full season, then next year you're just like, hey, Jacoby, thanks, dude. See ya. Where if, say, Sam Howell starts the year for you because you don't want Drake May playing yet, and he has a 4,000-yard, 30 touchdown, 10 pick season, and you all of a sudden make the playoffs, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibility. Is it the best possible outcome? Yes. Is it likely? No. But not out of the realm of possibility. Then what the hell do you do? And I don't know if people have, in the fan base and the media, have thought that fully through yet, where I'm wondering how much Adam Peters and company have thought that through.
I love that problem. That's a great problem. Sign me up for that problem. I would love to do 3 months of shows around that problem of you have 2 players who are too good. Well, oh my gosh, what a problem we've ended up here with. I personally would love to do that show. That sounds aspirational. I'm super pumped about even the vague possibility of that.
Michael, that's a great point. Shame on me.
When I say Sam Howell in DC, honestly, straight up, I see him as a 3. I think he's QB3. I think you've got a veteran. I think you've got a veteran at 2. Look, Sam Howell, people, you can get a 3rd rounder for him. What do you do with a 3rd rounder? You go try to find a young guy who might be Sam Howell someday. I see the value in keeping him, but to me, he's QB3. You know what he is. You can put him in there when you need to put him in there. But I'm bringing in a veteran as QB2. I think a 3 quarterback room is absolutely the way the NFL is trending. Last year, not counting Week 18, right, the garbage time week, more teams started a backup quarterback than didn't start a backup quarterback at some point during the season, right? You need that, and you need to go 3 deep because when the backup's in, you need somebody behind him. How's my QB3?
If that's the way you want to do it, I don't mind that. Drake's thing got a buddy if it's May. Drake's got a buddy in the room, been around, and you have that veteran that's the leader of the room. Okay. I just think Sam Howell's better than a quarterback 3. Sam Howell's a borderline starter. Low-end starter, super high-end backup. And if that dude's your QB3, I do wonder, would you be better off having your 3rd-round pick be a starting tight end for QB1 than keeping Sam Howell around either in case of emergency or to trade him for something like a 3rd-round pick a year later?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the 3rd-round pick is a high potential pick for sure, and tight end was a great spot to mention. They're going to need one. Eugene Shen is very much on the record as declaring that a high-value position. I won't be surprised at all when they go for one. Offensive line remains a huge priority. You can generally get an offensive lineman in the 3rd round, not a guy who's ready to jump in and start week 1, but as we mentioned, they're working on a long-term time frame here. So, yeah, if you wanted to load up, if you wanted to, grab as many picks as you can, as many guys as you can, I'm also curious if maybe, this is a trade for a future year, right? But when you move guys, if you move John Allen or if you move Sam Howell, you're moving them not even for picks this year, but for picks next year, knowing that you're going to have a whole year with your team and kind of your operation and you know how it goes. I don't think these guys are scared of kicking the can down the road.
No, and that opens up a world of possibilities, because if you can get either a current 4 or a future 3 and you're them, I take the future 3. And a lot of teams wouldn't.
Bill Belichick made a career out of that.
Yeah. And then he didn't have any of those players that he drafted in the last decade get to a second contract, and that's why his career's over now. But he had a good run, as they say.
I would take the Belichick. When we talk about good problems, I would take the Belichick style run with the problems that occur at the end of it. I would be all right if 18 years from now we're discussing the end of the era and how none of these draft picks from the last 5 years have panned out.
Yeah, co-sign on that. All right, last thing for Michael Phillips here, MP on the mic, 10 a.m. to noon on 910 The Fan in Richmond. Jason Kelce retiring is kind of the story of the day, and I was listening to a little Philly Sports Talk Radio on the way in, Michael, and you had people just calling WIP, our sister station in Philly, like in tears because of how much Jason Kelce has meant to them, the inspiration he provided, the leadership he had, the sense of community, all of those things. And I was thinking, is there an athlete that could retire in D.C. that could get this reaction where I'm doing this radio show in D.C.? So I've then opened that up to the audience in a 2-part question, which I will ask you now, and then we'll take more calls on it later in the show. Do you think there is a D.C. athlete that connected with the city and, let's say, the last 25 years in the way that Kelce did with Philly? And 2, is there a particular D.C. athlete for you that you're like, that's my guy when he retires or when he retired, that brought me to tears?
I love the question. I saw somebody posted online that Philadelphia, it's like the city that birthed democracy, and yet the starting center on the football team has 2 of the 5 greatest speeches in city history. He was so good today and so good after they won the Super Bowl. And he's just so likable. You can't help but love the guy. That would have been Cooley if they had won a Super Bowl while Cooley was here. He would have absolutely been loved in that way and would have become that kind of person and character around town. They didn't. I think Ovi is your logical choice here, right? Ovi is loved, and that Caps parade is probably the high mark of DC sports moments in the last decade or since 2000. Just a great day and kind of that party that went on, and the great moment of seeing him lift the cup after so long. Hopefully he gets the record, and there's kind of a new surge of Ovi love at the end, which I think could put us there. 25 is a good marker to cut it off at because, there have been those athletes through and through. I mean, you look at it, it's not a whole city thing, but certainly Gary Williams, John Thompson. I mean, there are coaches who have had that kind of broad outsized impact who you could have done a whole show the day they retired. I think it speaks to where the teams are at right now. If Juan Soto had stayed, you can project a line where it might have been him long term. Obviously, even if he comes back now, that's a little bit not as much. I'll be curious to hear what you have to say because I do like the topic a lot. I don't know that we're exactly living in a golden age right now.
No, and there's so many factors that go into it, and team success is an enormous part of it, and unfortunately, none of the DC sports teams are qualifying at the moment. I do think the guy currently, if the Commanders turn this around and Terry is able to go out on a high note, with a Super Bowl win high note, he could be that guy. But it's that's going to involve him staying in the next 7 years being unbelievable.
Honestly, I think John Allen's probably closer than Terry because can you picture a Super Bowl parade where Terry does something just crazy memorable? I can't.
Yeah. I definitely can. I think Terry is a more dynamic personality than John. John is a guy, and they both have some of this where they just kind of want to go home after the workday is done and be with their loved ones, and they're pretty low key guys. But there's more. I don't know. I think there's more there with Terry on the ability to give that speech than John, who's just yeah, we lined up. John could give the OV speech, but that's kind of short, sweet, to the point, memorable versus the emotional, introspective, journey capturing narrative that I think someone like Terry could deliver. Yeah,
I mean, look, honestly, the real answer is Robert, RG3. I mean, If he stays, if he wins, that dude was electric and so good at talking, which probably diminishes the role of talking.
Right.
But you see him on ESPN. He's really good at talking.
Yes.
And as professional talkers, game respects game.
That's clearly the highlight of Robert's career right there, is getting that compliment from you. Michael Phillips, MP on the mic. Hear him talk on the free Odyssey app, 10 a.m. to noon every single day. Just tune in to 910 The Fan in Richmond, or, of course, tune it in if you are driving down through Central Virginia. Michael, thank you, sir. Next Monday is the legal tampering period opening, so I do think we'll have news, a.k.a. I imagine we'll be talking this time next week.
I'll get my tamper-proof seal ready to go. We can bust it open at the appropriate time.
Excellent. See you then. Thank you, buddy. That is Michael Phillips with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, honest to God, what I think is the best quarterback conversation I have heard in this entire draft cycle. I ask a couple questions and get the hell out the way as Logan Paulson and Nate Tice from The Athletic and Yahoo Sports kick around Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, and what makes a great quarterback prospect. You do not want to miss this snippet of Take Command next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Looking up on the TV screen and watching what was one of my favorite parts of the Combine, which is watching Joe Milton just launch the ball into space. Yeah, absolutely insane. Deep ball performance. Just wait for it. Threw a football 73 yards. Milton, the quarterback prospect out of Tennessee. Probably a second, third, maybe fourth round, middle round prospect based off the arm strength. But, of course, the Commanders have their eye on quarterback at number 2. And when I was in Indianapolis last week, we sat down Thursday morning for what turned out to be just a phenomenal conversation between me, Logan, and Nate Tice. Mostly Logan and Nate Tice. I just tried to, add in where I could and mostly stay the hell out the way. As these two guys who watch as much tape as anybody got going on Drake May, on Jaden Daniels, on the strengths, on the weaknesses, and what truly makes a great quarterback prospect. A tremendous conversation. The full thing, which we even got in beyond quarterback eventually after like 30-plus minutes of talking QBs. You'll hear about 20 of it now. Is available on the Take Command feed, so definitely worth checking out the full pod. But to start, you could start right here because here's how that conversation started right here, right now.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Joining us on Radio Row at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, it's Nate Tice, NFL analyst for The Athletic and Yahoo Sports. What's up, dude?
How you doing? I know that I always touch my nose during intros, and I just did it again. I do it every single time, and I realize it's
a nervous tick.
A nervous tick, apparently, I have. Before I start dumb, I'm doing awesome. Surviving Indianapolis. I see just getting in.
I just got in. I leave today. Today is a sprint. We taped something earlier, starting at 8:30.
Okay.
I'm gonna tape with you, and then I'm packing all this stuff up, and then going to take remote off of Radio Row. Hope time for lunch, and then going to the airport.
I'm so jealous. I look. I was like, I might move it up a day. I might now, but I'm leaving Friday, but we had to come in on Sunday, which is you don't come in on Sunday in Indianapolis. It's a Tuesday to Saturday. It's a good
window.
That's a good window. Now the quarterbacks throw on Saturday, and it used to be earlier, and that's me all up. But no, I'm doing great.
He's happy to be here. All right. So I want to get us started with quarterbacks, and I want to let you two, who watch as much tape as anybody, just kind of see where the day takes us, where the conversation takes us in this draft. But you were one of the first guys that I know, even in this cycle, as kind of the Jaden swell built up, that was like, no, I am a Drake May guy. Why do you like Drake May? Why are you so high on it?
Yeah, it's first off, Caleb Williams and May, I think, are of this draft. Not the knock on Daniels, but like May, to me, obviously just the size. It's the first thing you see. 6'4", 230. We'll see exactly what he weighs and everything. But it's like, all right, there we go. That's a first and foremost what we like to see. Durability and stuff. And if you look at so many of the top quarterbacks right now, just look at size, speed combo. I think, too, is that he's an underrated athlete. He's one of the best scramblers in the country coming out of college. One of the efficient ones. Just getting that first down, getting that first down, getting out of bounds. But constantly, it's like a third down, he's running past true ACC, even SEC when he's playing South Carolina defenders. It's like, okay, good athlete from a family of good athletes. And then to me, and this is what I've seen now, especially for playing now, you got to be aggressive. You got to push the ball over the middle of the field, and he loves to do it. And he'll split zones. He'll do it against the blitz. And so I've always looked at, I'd rather have the guy and rein it back in than the other way around. Like, hey, come on, push the ball. I don't if I'm a coach, I don't have to work with him at all. It's like, hey, this is great. You're already doing those things. And as I've kind of watched him more on film, even his quote unquote games, NC State being one, he's adjusting protections. He's sliding. He's throwing the back shoulder. He's trying to will his team to win. So some of that intangible stuff that's like really made me grow. I really like him. I just think with Caleb, I was like, these two to me, been officially kind of studying these guys for about years, like for the draft. Like these are two top 4 prospects I've watched, like officially. So to me, it's just all that size, speed, arm strength combo.
Yeah, I mean, he's fantastic in that regard. But I do think there are, I mean, I think that's what I should say this to fans in our market, right? Like that there's no perfect prospect, right? There's always issues. Some of the issues you see with him and that kind of give you pause about saying he's going to be 100% of awesome player.
The natural drawbacks of being aggressive is he goes on a little bit of a heat check.
Yeah.
Yep. And I've started liking throwing the ball over the middle to like a guy. Like you gotta that's to open up the entire offense and everything like that. So if guy doesn't do that, I have issues with it. We'll talk about another guy about that in a minute. But you can get in trouble doing that. You're trying to squeeze into tight windows. So there might be those games where you get punished. The tip ball happens, and even if it's not your fault, he goes on some natural heat checks. He'll try to, being against the blitz, which I'm a big believer in. If someone's trying to gash you, you try to gash them back. And again, you might single those throws. And it can be frustrating to lead some of that. Those are the things to me. There's some footwork stuff with him. I've already seen improvement from his redshirt freshman year to redshirt sophomore year. He's the youngest quarterback too, other than JJ McCarthy, but these top 3-ish guys. So that's another thing. It's like he's already improved. He's young. He's a good athlete. He works. That's why I'm not as low on that as other people are. And I don't think it affects his timing too much.
No, and I think like everything you said, I think I agree with. I think Craig probably agrees with it as well. When you watch his big time throws, like it's awesome. It's like perfect foot. I don't want to say perfect football, but it's like you want from the quarterback position, no doubt. The thing that gets me is like the heat check. I'm okay with that even. It's the thing that gets me is there's these moments of inconsistency, like in the Virginia game, kind of right before the halftime.
The sprays, right there.
And you're like, why does this happen? And like, is that something that you're concerned about at all? And do you think he can fix it? I think is the other.
I see those too.
Yeah.
And to me, is like sometimes he's a line drive thrower.
Yeah.
And I see guys when they have those misses, it's a bad miss. Like Justin Herbert's a great example.
Yeah, that's a great example.
He misses one, and it's like by 10 yards, and you're like, what the hell was that? And then the next 3 throws are great. And that he has that same thing.
Yeah.
Tannehill's the same way. They have that line drive style. I'm not as worried because, again, it's not an accuracy thing. It's just a one bad miss thing. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So the miss is bad, but then it's like, it's not an accuracy concern. But I do see those two. I'm not going to lie. He has about one of those a game. And it's like, always like,
yeah, and
it's a simple route sometimes too. And you're like, what was that? And then next 3 throws, he's throwing 20 yards and hitting the guy on the
that Virginia game, like he misses 2 deep balls kind of right before halftime there. And you're like, man, if you hit these, this is the game. And I think when you look at his stat line, it's fine. When you look at some throws he makes up in the field, you're like, this is awesome. But it's like, it's the difference in that game probably. You know?
Absolutely.
So it's one of those things where I like the good, but probably because I can't explain it. A little bit like I don't understand. It makes me a little bit nervous.
Yeah, I'd say like the way we phrased it last week when we did our big quarterback pod was kind of like there's these stretches where it just seems like he forgets how to play football, and you're just like, what the hell? Was like the footwork gets really sloppy, where you're just like, oh, you just look like you're kind of messing around in the backyard, like because you're waiting for the last friend to show up game, like you're just trying stuff, but you're in the middle of a conference game, and then like you said, it's fun, and I think that's the weird thing about this class is. There is so much beauty in the eye of the beholder.
Yes.
It is very much a pick your flavor, very much a like I've had people on the radio show this week be like, when you watch the tape, Jaden Daniels is the better player. And then the next guy sounds like when you watch the tape, it's obvious Drake May is the better player. And it's because you just favor different traits. And I think the thing that I personally struggle with the most is the age thing. It's a matter of like how close is Jaden to a finished product, how close is Drake to a finished product, and then if I'm evaluating as a coach, especially nevertheless a GM, like how comfortable do I feel about the relationship to get them to whatever that best version of finish is.
Well, you also have to look at their situations. Like the Daniels is playing with 2 legit first round receivers and another guy next year that'll be probably a middle round guy. Yeah. The line was solid. It wasn't great. It was okay.
But
way better Carolina, way better than USC as well. And that also I watched North Carolina and everyone that Tez Walker came in a couple weeks late and it was just like, oh, he's got a top 2 round guy, and watched Tez Walker at the Senior Bowl and now he's a day 3 guy, and that's his best weapon.
Yeah,
was a round 3 speed only receiver, and he's making him look like, oh, I might have this guy in the second round, So like the whole finished product thing, that's another thing, is just like the situation, kind of coaching have they got and everything. The eye of the beholder thing. If you look at like quarterbacks I grew up around, it's like, yeah, Dante Culpepper, big quarterback, throw far and run far. Like, so it's a real thing. And those are the guys I see work. Like, those are the guys' durability stuff. I'm sure when you ends, you want everybody to be a Y.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is what I feel too. And I think this is maybe how I feel about the quarterback class.
Yeah.
Is when you watch tight ends, right? You're like, this is what this guy does well.
Yes.
So how do we maximize this in the offense, right? And I think one of the things about these quarterbacks is I think they're all, even Jaden Daniels, I think there's like a little bit of a difference in terms of a passer.
Yeah.
But the playmaking ability is undeniable. If we can get a coordinator and an offensive structure that supports his skill, he's going to be better off here than somewhere else, right? And I think that's the thing that I keep coming back to. It's like, you flip a coin, right? And say, oh, I got Jaden Daniels. But if we build the offense, we have a development plan for them. That's where you see these young quarterbacks really hit them, right?
Yeah, and this is also gets into, because you always want, the perfect situation, perfect coach for everything, is how many guys you get around and it's like, oh, that sounded good. And then when the actual stuff starts unfolding, that's where it also, prospect wise, you get into scheme proof. Like, you go, this guy in 8 of 10 situations will work,
that's a great point.
And that's kind of my high. I usually reserve that for like receivers.
Yeah.
Because receivers are so situation dependent. And that's a whole nother discussion we get into, but that's why I'll go, oh, like Marvin Harrison Jr. is like, he's scheme proof.
Right.
I do not see, it doesn't matter the quarterback, the scheme, this guy will work. For a quarterback, that's so much harder because there's so many variables.
That's when you get to like the Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck level of like, that dude's 99 prospect. Yes. It doesn't matter.
He'll make it work.
I've been thinking about this the last couple of weeks. Obviously, we're in draft season and people talk about this stuff. That was literally the worst version of Andrew Luck's career. And he's still like borderline Hall of Famer for what he did in
crazy.
Like 6 years that he was healthy or whatever it was. But like, that was the worst version. And he's one of the best quarterbacks we've seen in the last 2 decades, obviously, when he was healthy. Like, none of these guys, even Caleb's not that.
Right. Yeah. Not Luck. Luck is, Luck is.
Well, that's people have to understand the bar is so high for a quarterback to be
look at Trevor.
Right.
Trevor Lawrence is a great example. Like,
he's probably the best prospect since Luck.
Yeah. To me, the top 3 prospects, and I'll legit say it's Caleb, not in this order, but it's just top 3 here: Trevor, Caleb, and Drake May. Like, to me, in my last 10 years that I watched this and watch what's happening with Trevor.
Yeah. I had a hard time because the situation was
they're making dink and dunk, and it's like, let this guy like rip the ball, like but that's the thing. That's when you don't get that perfect thing. It's like, like last year was good, and first half of this year was solid, but it's not like overwhelming.
Right.
And that's another thing. He was scheme proof and all that, and situation proof. It's hard. Well, with Meyer doesn't help and everything like that for a year, for half a year. So like that didn't help too. But it's like, again, these guys, it's like there's no perfect prospects, no perfection. Not always, unless you're Jalen Hurts going to the Eagles. So.
And so I was going to say, like, if you were making a system for Drake May, like, what does that look like as opposed to Jay Daniels, and like, what is the best fit for those guys? And you think Cliff Kingsbury has shown an ability to get that done?
With Cliff, it's interesting because he is more underneath and dinky dunky and high low kind of concepts. To me, Drake May, and maybe just because it's what I like, is like a Bruce Arians offense where he just
like fire
5-7 step, rip it, rip those throws. Even kind of more of those I know you're more Shanahan offense stuff, like more kind of like what Kellen Moore is that what kind of Sean Payton, those kind of offensives that are more Air Coryell, like more straight drop back, more quarterback. He handles everything. He's the guy pointing out everything and situation. What Dax does in Dallas, because that offense is really Scott Linehan's, which is so it's kind of a different tree than a lot of the other guys right now. So like that type of offense to me, because they push the ball. And,
I was going to say, in 2021, when Cliff was in Arizona, I felt like they did a really good job of getting like these 3x1s.
Yes.
And basically being like, we're going to run a go with AJ Brown. If you like it, Kyler, like that's your outlet off a 3-step vertical. And I feel like Drake May
take the 101 and rip it.
Would like AJ Green, but
AJ Green. Sorry, would make that work.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Especially that's the thing too, is Washington's receivers are it's pretty good. So I actually like that fit too. And like him and Scary Terry, he would pepper him because he'd just be an X and just let him go that. He's willing to do that. That's again, it's like it's kind of doing a lot more, like you said, the 3x1 stuff, because like Cliff likes like, hey, this is 1-on-1, if it's zone, you go to the trip side, all that. I think he'd be comfortable with that and pushing all that. It's just also I don't know what Cliff's version 2.0 in the NFL is going to look like.
Yeah,
like that's another. It's a question I'm curious to see.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like he knows quite yet either.
Yeah, was that because of Kyler? Like that's another thing. It's like you don't know with these guys until you get to a new situation.
But I was going to say, in some ways, that's encouraging. Like if he's building a system around Kyler, it shows he has an understanding of what guys do well, and can maximize a skill set. I guess, right?
Yep.
So.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, so if we're then looking at Jaden, what is the situation where you're like, no, like I like Drake better, but like that's the right fit for Jaden?
Yeah, well, with Jaden, so I have him as a full tier below these other guys. Obviously,
so are you in the camp that thinks that Jaden is closer to JJ or whoever your QB4 is versus Jaden to Drake?
I am, and absolutely. And if you told me that a month ago, I'd be like, haha, no. Like, it's like this guy's, and I wrote about it for Yahoo and really dove in 8 games, looked at true media data, and there's a lot of red flags. And it's not only just the size. The number one thing is size. And I just looked at quarterbacks under.
Just real quick, because I actually got a YouTube comment about this the other day, and I actually thought it was like, this is worth explaining, unlike a lot of things that happen in YouTube comments. But like when people point to the size, right? Why is size so important for an NFL quarterback?
First, durability is the natural one. But second is work from the pocket. You got a defender grabbing at you. If you're sub 205, this is why weight classes exist in combat sports. If you're 202 and you're a light heavyweight and you got a heavyweight pulling at you, he's going to yank you down. You can't get to that creation ability if you can't get out of their grasp.
Right.
If you
so you think the best example is like Big Ben, right?
Yeah,
he's a heavyweight, and you couldn't bring him down.
Josh Allen now. Sure. Shoot, even Lamar. He has some more athleticism to that. But even the guy Jalen Hurts, Mahomes, all these guys, Burrow, Herbert, 230, 235, 238, 225, 220. These are big dudes. Those are heavyweights. And I think that gets lost in the shuffle sometimes. I've had reservations with Zach Wilson when he came out. He was 208, quote unquote, but I was kind of knew he was under 200. Sure enough, he gets into pros. He's trying to get into that creation stuff. He gets yanked down right away. You can't get to the creation if you don't have the strength to get to it. So that's always a thing for me is that I looked at quarterbacks under 205 just historically. Since 2000, the only ones that succeeded is Kirk Cousins, 1 year of Aaron Brooks, and 1 year of Jeff Garcia. So it's an outlier. Like, and I more like Bryce Young is obviously an outlier last year, but like this is more JJ McCarthy and Daniels would be more outliers than people realize, I think.
The other thing I would just say is obviously you're dealing, and this is me just being like devil's advocate a little bit, is like you're dealing with a different type of athlete here with Jaden Daniels in terms of comparing him to Zach Wilson or any of the guys you just mentioned, right? And I think sometimes when you look at skilled fighters in combat sports, you made the comparison. Speed also is a deadly weapon, right? In terms of allowing you to beat and deal with bigger people. You know what I'm saying? So that's his trump card. Right. How do you see that fitting and working into the NFL?
Oh, well, speed kills. Yeah. It always helps. He's not a real creative runner.
No.
He's a plant and go, but still you can find opportunities to do that. I do like him. That's the thing. It's like just bringing up some of the negative stuff.
It's so funny when you were talking about Drake May. I was like, he hates Jaden Daniels. Not hates. Hates is the wrong word, but they're
definitely lower.
The issues with Jaden Daniels are like, it's like all of the issues that you said were positives with Drake May are issues with Jaden.
Yeah,
and it's not like you
can't size stuff.
And it's not like you can't find good throws and stuff over the middle, but this with Drake May, it's all over the film.
That's his strength.
Yes.
And Daniels and even looking like throwing over the middle to me is always just I've realized that especially how defenses are doing right now, so much zone stuff, you have to be able to push it over there. In between the numbers, 10 to 20 yards, 10 to 22 yards, digs, basics, benders. That's what they're daring you to throw. And this is what the top quarterbacks or the top offenses, all the Shanahan guys, that's what they attack. Even if those quarterbacks are quote unquote lesser.
That's where your linebackers are, right?
Yes.
They're your worst coverage players.
Weakness, and that's where the best yards after catch opportunities come. That's where you create explosive plays. I think always thrown to the outside, your offense will go up and down because you're just so iso ball. Can this guy just win over and over? Right. Yeah, if I have Randy Moss, if I have a guy that can, I have
Malik Neighbors,
and Brian Thomas, that works. Yeah. Right now, Joe Burrow, Bengals. Yeah, if I have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, I don't need to throw over the middle. I can just work these guys. But there's again, it can lead to inconsistencies. Daniels, because his arm is more above average than maybe good or better. I think his accuracy is good, but that's where I'm like, okay, he doesn't throw over the middle. The only quarterback drafted in the first 2 rounds the last 5 years that threw over the middle less was Justin Fields. and it's still been an issue.
Right.
And again, you see that there's limitations to how he plays, and Justin Fields is 30 pounds heavier and runs just as fast.
And I think one of the things that got me is like you look at big time throws, like for quarterbacks, and it's just like, you know, kind of like highlight, like what can they do?
Yeah.
When you watch Drake May, it's like beautiful Dyson guys over the middle, tight windows. And when you watch Jaden Daniels, it's box fades.
Yep. Over the top.
Box fades. And so he's not like reading stuff out. And there are throws like where he's throwing like, you know, the dig wheel and he's kind of reading that, where those are great throws, but in terms of frequency and you know, it's so different. It's like they're not even in the same category, really, when you look at the quality of the throw.
Right. And that's even when we're writing about it, that's what I was trying to say. It's like he does push the ball. I've seen the explosive plays, but it's over the top.
Yeah.
I had an epiphany at a high school camp a couple of years ago, and I got stuck with like 3 freshman quarterback going against a bunch of seniors. Like, it's a long story, but anyways, I'm trying to get them to like just complete a pass. And the only throws that they could even see were go ball, slants, and hitches. Outside. Everything's outside, because it's easier to see.
I coach high school football.
Yeah.
And our quarterback is a sophomore. And that was the whole conversation. We couldn't throw it over the middle of the field because you couldn't see it.
Can't see it.
And so if you can't see it, I feel like it's hard to teach that, to your point. And so it gives you kind of some reservation about where he's at. And even comparing him to J.J. McCarthy, who I think sees the middle of the field pretty good.
That's a strength.
Yeah.
It is, and that's why I think so I have those guys graded closer, like more of that kind of late first, early second. Like if I did a big board, like Daniels would probably be in the late 20s for me, and McCarthy would be somewhere in the 30s. So like if just overall, I have a big board coming out.
JJ's QB4 for you?
Yeah, he is. And again, we're going on this like a couple months ago, I had no idea. And then once you dive in and start McCarthy, you have to watch the whole season because they only have so many throws.
Some last year too.
Oh, yeah.
It's a long process.
And when I watch McCarthy, and he grew on me, and obviously he's a good athlete. He's skinny again, so all that weight stuff I brought with Daniels, same thing with him. These guys would be outliers, but he works over the middle. He's willing to push the ball. He can throw really well on the move. That's another thing. Daniels breaks outside the contain. He's looking to run. It's not extending, and that's another thing that you see the top guys do. They extend the throw, work a zone, and work it outside the pocket, extend the plays, ad lib. Daniels ad libs to run. McCarthy ad-libs to throw. And I just thrown over the middle. So I think with him, so even if I have McCarthy as like a guy I look at in the 30s, I think guys from those Shanahan offenses, the Vikings, Kevin O'Connell, pick 8, the Falcons, they have a guy from that tree as well. They love that. That's how they attack. So I think those guys, those coaches, once they get eyes on him, are going to go like, this is what we like. And so he's going to grow.
All right, that is from Take Command. There's about 10 more minutes of pure quarterback discussion. Another 15 of the rest of the draft with Nate Tice in the Take Command feed now. Incredible podcast, definitely worth your time to check out after our show tonight. Or if you want to go listen to that now, I understand. The good thing is this show will be waiting for you when you are done with that, because we have a podcast too. You can always check it out. Just search The Hoffman Show in your favorite podcast feed, on demand, anytime, anywhere. When we get back to a version of our question of the day, Jason Kelce retiring, the #1 story in sports. I was listening to some Philly sports talk radio today and just heard people calling in like crying because of how much they cared about Kelce. He was their favorite player, the center on the football team, and he moved one of the most passionate sports cities in the country that way. So we asked earlier, who are some of the athletes that maybe have made you feel like that in the past? My question for you next on the phones at 301-230-0980 is, who is the current DC athlete who you think has the best chance to be DC's Jason Kelce, if you will? 301-230-0980, taking your calls next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. I promised Anthony, I messed up. I didn't pay off a promise. Sorry, I'm going to pay it off right now. I promised a YouTube update at 5:30 around Take Command. And that update is, that I'm now going to give you just after 6 o'clock, that update is we are shifting the home of Take Command on YouTube from 106.7 The Fan to the Team 980. Just an internal decision. Ran it by some folks today. But since I'm over here, it makes sense. And there's a lot of great stuff that the fan is doing that is already on video. And, we're hoping to add to our video repertoire over here as well. I was like, hey, I think it makes more sense for the full episodes of Take Command to be on the Team 980. And they were like, I think you're right. I was like, cool. So starting with Thursday's episode of Take Command, which will be our post NFL Combine mock draft 2.0. Full episodes of Take Command will be available to watch for your viewing pleasure at the Team 980 on YouTube. So if you're not subscribed now, which would be a little weird because if you're seeing this on YouTube now, obviously I guess you could be listening on the radio and not subscribed. So maybe it's not as weird. Point is, if you're watching on YouTube now, you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? And if you're listening on the radio or on the Odyssey app, go ahead and pop on when you can, because most of you are likely driving. Don't play with your apps on your phone while you're doing that. But when it's safe, grab your phone or go on your laptop or your tablet or wherever you consume YouTube, your smart TV. Search the Team 980, hit subscribe, and Take Command will come on your device. So there we go. That's the announcement. We did it, Anthony. We made the announcement.
I didn't even know, but
no, you didn't.
It is.
You're not really involved in Take Command.
Yeah.
There's like a whole separate unit that produces that. You just you do a great job with this show, and that's enough of a chore.
Thank you.
Then you're just dealing with me. At least there's Logan to soften the blow over there.
Yeah.
You get whatever circus I throw at you. Speaking of circus, tomorrow, Linnell re-enters the ring. He'll be on with us for Overreaction Tuesday tomorrow. We'll tell you more about what's coming up on tomorrow's show.
Oh, he has some spicy takes, by the way.
Oh, God.
Me, CK, and Linnell. Oh, my gosh.
Did you guys have it out last week while I was out?
No, it was literally in the hallway maybe 15, 20 minutes ago.
Oh.
Yeah.
Dang, I missed out.
I don't know if you recognize I was gone for a little bit, but
I did. I just figured you were, getting a snack or something.
Well, that was part of the plan, but
and then you got caught up coming back?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll find out what those takes are tomorrow. 5 o'clock, I think, is the plan. We'll talk to Linnell, get that all squared away. But Linnell returns for Overreaction Tuesday. Also, never read the comments back on Wednesday. But and Jason Kelce announced his retirement today, and I was thinking about, is there an athlete that is currently playing? Because we kind of talked earlier in the show about some athletes that when they retire, and obviously Ovechkin's name comes up a lot, but is there another athlete that has retired in the last even 25 years that would have that kind of reaction where you shuts down talk radio for the day, people calling in, sharing tears, and Ovechkin's going to get that because his individual greatness at his sport surpasses even Kelce, who's a Hall of Famer. Although there's so many other factors that go into Kelce being who he is in Philadelphia. But do you think there's anybody currently playing who could get there?
Outside of Ovi that you already mentioned, if Bradley Beal pulled the LeBron, he somehow found a way to win. The Wizards were able to, have a successful rebuild, and he came back home, played for a couple of seasons, brought the city a championship on his way out the door. That's the only way I could see, an active player getting that type of response. But I don't see that happening.
No, one, I don't see that happening because Bradley Beal's body seems to be failing him at every turn.
Yeah.
It would be interesting, though, because the trade would kind of kick off the rebuild in the same way that Cleveland, LeBron, et cetera. But, LeBron, I don't know, LeBron's one of one.
Truly is.
I think that's a different, and especially with, his relationship with Northeast Ohio because he's of there and from there. I do think Brad, represented the city very well for a long time, and he deserves credit for that. But I don't think that's – I mean, I guess if they come back and he's the final piece on the championship team, that'd be a pretty cool story. But it just seems so unbelievably unlikely. I do think it has to be from the football team, with all due respect. I do think that if the Nats had continued to be good, and Juan Soto had continued to be Juan Soto, and won multiple MVPs, and he kind of starts his career with a World Series and clutch hits and everything, and they win a couple of more along the way. Could the Nats have been big enough in D.C. and Soto being the king of that he could have gotten that? With also his personality, the way he goes about it, I think he was the guy that was on track for that. Outside of that, with the Nats winning the World Series and thus raising the profile of the team, I do feel like it kind of has to come from the Commanders to get like on Kelce's level, just sheer scope. The NFL is the biggest thing in town, and especially in this town. And so at that point, I start going to, the guys that are most obvious are Terry and John. And I do feel like opinions are more split on Allen than they are on McLaurin, because I feel like McLaurin has been more consistently great. And I think people also look at Terry as somewhat of a sympathetic figure because of how bad the quarterback play has been since he's been here. Where John, it's like, nah, dude, like you're in control of your own thing and you're a part of these defenses that are so frustrating. And people have questions about his leadership after last year. I don't think those are entirely fair, but that is the narrative. I do think if things turn around and John is a huge part of it and they win, then hometown kid, the whole thing, he has, does he let his hair down, if you will, in a way that he never really has? Like John's honest on occasion, but he's rarely reflective. And I think part of like the appeal and the emotional appeal to Kelce is he's been very open. Like this is a man who cries a lot, and he lets us see those tears, and people see that human level of it. And John's just like not that emotional of a person, at least publicly. He very well might be, or like the emotions are different. Like we occasionally see anger and rage from John, but we do not see that like the guard never comes down in the same way that it has with Kelce. And I do think that Terry's vulnerability in talking about like the humanity of him, I think of the podcast he did with the Pivot. Like I do think that probably lends itself to a Jason Kelce-esque day more than the way John's gone about it. And that's not me saying that the way John does things, John versus Terry, is like better or worse. It's just like what's going to lead to that kind of connection and reaction. And I think also like, we were talking with Phillips about like, do you ever get the mummer thing at the parade? John is more likely to dress up as a mummer, but give a great memorable speech. I do think Terry is more likely to do that than Allen. And I don't know that anyone else on the team currently has that potential ability.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the charisma or just like the charismatic, part of a person is really important. And I think Jason Kelce, he actually has all of that. Anytime like he's forced to, get on the mic, you can just feel that passion, that emotion. And that's what I got from his presser. Like he really loves football, and like watching him retire was like really, really tough. So yeah, if it was somebody from the football team, I would agree that it would probably be Terry, just from that standpoint alone.
I think part of the beauty of Kelce is he kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, is there one? Like, is Ricky Stromberg our guy, and we just don't know it yet? Like,
oh man,
who knows? I do think that that's part of it. Is you don't necessarily know where it's going to come from. The player has to be great. He's got to be charismatic. It's got to be all of those things, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a traditional star position or even a playmaker if the personality's just right. I think of then, I was like, okay, Wizards, it's obviously Ovi, Oshie, like Backstrom. Tom Wilson, I think, is a great candidate here. He's actually probably one of my favorites because he kind of hits a lot of the right notes in terms of he's not the star, but he's beloved. He's super well known. Yep. He's ingrained in the community, all those kinds of things. There was one guy on the basketball team that I think is super interesting that if he's here through the rebuild, I could see him playing a huge part on like playoff wins, and he will be a big part of the reason why things turn around if it does turn around.
Kuz.
No, not Kuz. I love Kuz, but I think Kuz is a different, like, I don't think people like look at Kyle Kuzma. I don't think people look at Kyle Kuzma and be like, I connect with that dude. I think people are like, I respect that dude. But like Kuz lives a lavish lifestyle and like loves his high fashion.
Okay,
and
that's
like
fair.
I love Kuz for that stuff. I admire that stuff. I wish I could do some of that stuff. I don't think I could pull off some of the fits that let's be honest.
I think I could.
I think you could. You got that's a swag.
Some of the baggy clothes is too much for me.
Some of the swag that Kuz has is just not relatable.
Unique to him.
Yeah, which is like not a diss at Kuz.
Yeah.
It's a compliment, really.
Yeah.
I think Corey Kispert is a really interesting guy to think about in this because he is a dude who has such a great love for the sport and for it being done the right way, and he is a low-key leader on that team. And I think every time I talk to the guy, I'm just like, I want that guy on my team. And I think that's the kind of like that's the number one attribute that gets you beloved in a city as a sportsman. Is like, is it just undeniable that you want that guy on your team? As a player, and now Corey's never going to be as good of a basketball player as Jason Kelce is a football player. But as a competitor, as a teammate, as a leader, as a community partner, and I think the veteran, eventual veteran Corey Kispert, who's going to hit some big three in a playoff game, that's the kind of guy that people are going to be like, I remember him talking about how changes needed to happen, and he, some of what he said was why Tommy Shepard got fired. People are going to say that, and they're going to be right 10 years from now when he retires. I think that's if I had to pick someone on the Wizards, obviously Bilal feels like the most compelling candidate because he's going to ultimately be the best player probably. And I could see a love for him developing. He's got a great personality as well. But Corey is kind of that right, gritty, whatever, that I think could certainly hit that note in the way that Wilson does, in the way that Kelce does, in the ways that some of the players that were, in the way that Terry does, like Terry in his own way. I mean, Terry being a third-round pick helps him in this. So I think those are some of the guys that I think about. All right, when we get back, Dave Johnson, talk about a legend. We're going to cry when he retires. Dave Johnson joins us ahead of Wizards and Jazz tonight here on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. I'm going to skip Dave's intro and bring him in, Anthony, because this song, there's a story that needs to be told, and Dave, as the longtime play-by-play voice of the Washington Wizards here in D.C., Dave, I'm sure you've seen DJ Cool many, many times performing at Capital One Arena. So
yes.
I mentioned when you were on the show last week that I had obviously just gotten back from Indianapolis, where I went to the Pacers game. We talked about Gainbridge Fieldhouse. DJ Cool performed at halftime at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. All of a sudden, I am just like, I came all this way. Here I am in Indianapolis at Gainbridge Fieldhouse to see Washington, D.C.'s DJ Cool perform for halftime.
Well, I mean, it shows your ability to relate to good quality, no matter where you've traveled or how far you've gone.
Yeah, I mean, if DJ Cool wants to follow me around to every sporting event I go to and do halftime performances, I'm good with that. Although, Anthony, I think we needed to go to Indiana and do a little crowd education. People were not into it at the level that they should have been, and that is a reflection of the Pacers crowd, not DJ Cool.
Yeah, and DJ Cool knows how to rock DC. And by the way, we have DJ Heat, and she is just one of the most amazing. When you come to a Wizards game and you feel that energy. I told her once last year, we were doing in fact, another one is coming up where we do these community tree plantings, and it was an all-day event that she was disc jockeying. And needless to say, that's a different kind of event. That's not a party type event. It's a tree planting, and she still had the perfect mix to get us in the mood for tree planting. And that day, Georgie Mirasan. Now you can picture this: 7'7". He was wielding a pick or whatever you do to break ground, so you can plant a tree. And I thought for sure he'd be the first human to strike oil in Washington D.C. because one swing. I mean, not only is he a tall guy, but a strong guy. But it was a great event, and DJ Heat is great, and this is also what makes basketball games great. It's a basketball, but win or lose, it's always good entertainment.
Yeah, no doubt. Now George Mirashan with the gigantic pick is that is a sight, Dave. That is in my head now. And yes, DJ Heat, phenomenal. Also, we follow each other on Instagram, and like seeing some of her stories, sometimes all the events she does, I am exhausted watching her work. She's phenomenal. Wizards very lucky, and yeah.
Britt Waters also, who was part of our in-game with Dennis T. But Britt Waters apparently is going to be on the Drew Barrymore show tomorrow.
I saw that.
Make sure people tune into the. I must admit, I'm familiar with Drew Barrymore. I didn't know she had a show, and I'm going to watch tomorrow.
There you go. Britt Waters bringing the audience, bringing Dave Johnson, target demographic for Drew Barrymore. All right, Wizards and you, Dave, are out in Utah tonight. Looks like we're going to get Bilal Coulibaly back. What can we expect from him coming off the injury?
Well, when you say I'm out in Utah, this is, again, so many firsts we have on the Hoffman show. I just across the street here in Salt Lake City. I'm standing outside our team bus, and we're about to go to the arena. And it is cold, but for the Hoffman show, I don't mind standing in the cold. But tonight, what you want to see from this Wizards team is they're facing a team tonight, with all due respect to Utah Jazz, I think they can beat. Look, the Friday night against the Clippers, again, with all due respect, the Clippers have Paul George and James Harden and Russell Westbrook and, come on, Kawhi Leonard. It's a Hall of Fame. They need to have an off night, and we need to have a perfect night. And that's just facts. Basketball is a sport with a shot clock. You're not going to, pull a soccer or hockey upset where you go into a defensive shell for 60 minutes or 48 minutes and come out with a victory. So this team, I think, will get back to tonight, especially they have a real chance to win because I think Kyle Kuzma said it best. The first part of the season, there was a lot of individual work going on, and it's bearing out, whether it's Kyle Kuzma having a career year, whether it's Denny Avdia having a career year, whether it's Corey Kispert having a career year, whether it's Marvin Bagley now getting a chance with the Wizards and maybe showing signs that, this is why he was the number 2 overall pick. But now what they want to do is get better collectively as a team. Now, that doesn't mean that this is the team going forward. We know it's not. There's going to be a lot of changes. This is part of a process and a journey, but this is not an individual sport. It's a team sport. And so you have to learn and gel collectively as a team. And that's what I expect them to do tonight against Utah because, again, with the way it shakes out, you go into this matchup knowing that this is one the Wizards are capable of getting. And I say that because of the way we played in New Orleans, the way we played in Dallas, the way we played against the Lakers. You go right down the line.
No doubt. And I think the other thing, too, is obviously Utah's missing some pieces. Otto Porter, former Wizard, current Jazz, current injured. He is out. Lauri Markkanen is out. And this Utah team has lost 8 of 9 games. Of course, the Wizards are trying to avoid extending a just absolutely miserable losing streak that is even longer than that. But what has it been like this year, Dave, like just to be around the team when you go into these types of games where you're like, no, like this is a team that is much more on our level. Like obviously it's in the NBA. They always going to look at the opponent and be like, that's another NBA team. So are we. We can compete. But when that subconscious isn't going like, okay, their record is their record and our record is our record, is there just a different energy around the group?
I don't think it changes with the team because, again, I think people, and I mean that seriously or sincerely, because people have to understand why that these guys made it to the NBA. They're one of 450 players on the entire planet that is playing in, by far the best basketball league in the world. It's not even close. It's not like having a soccer, football conversation where you can say England or Germany it's not even close. If you put an an American team against a Spanish team or Italian team, they're just going to blow their doors off because the talent level is that much better. And the same if you played, if you played a basketball team with not a good record like the Wizards against the top college team, they would blow their doors off. The level is just so different. So what I'm saying is that when they know when they're facing a Denver, or they know when they're facing a Clippers, it's going to be a challenge. But they don't go in saying, well, why are we even trying out here? Because they're fighting for their NBA lives out here, and the NBA is a good paying gig, and they want to keep it going. And it's evidence about the way against the Clippers the other night. I know what the final score was, but I also know how the team fought till the very end. So I don't think that changes. Does it change from my perspective or a fan perspective? Admittedly, you start to think, wow, I look on paper and I can see, how we can get this one. And you know what? There's also nights when you're so proud of this team. Look, we go into Boston, and Michael Malone, the coach of Denver, used that example before the Nuggets game because the Nuggets wanted to protect home court and said, look, I told my team that they go into Boston and they lose by 4 points, 104-100, and keep Boston to 104 points. So, the word is out that if you think you're just going to show up and beat the Wizards, that's not going to be the case. And, that certainly didn't happen with the way the Clippers played the other night. And they brought it, and we expected them to bring it. And, I expect Utah to bring it. I mean, think of the different situations. The Wizards are in an absolute rebuild. And I've been through bad 19-win seasons, for goodness sakes, where you didn't know where the plan was. There's a laid-out plan, and this plan was laid out in the summer, and we knew this was coming. So whether we have 9 wins, 19 wins, I don't know if it really matters. But if you're Utah and you're coming off of February in which you just had 3 wins, they're in a much different structure right now than the Wizards are. So, in terms of hope right now for the Utah Jazz, and obviously they're dealing with injuries, it's in some ways more of a depressing situation than the Wizards because I get it. We didn't win any games in February, but they only won 3 more. And I think they're supposed to be further along in the process, which it's not a knock against the Utah Jazz. This is a tough league, and they're in a tough conference.
No, totally. I was talking with some folks online last week about like Lauri Markkanen, and it was like, yeah, he's a fantastic player, but if he's the best player on your team, like the long-term success sustainability is probably not going to be there. All-star, sure, but not the guy you want leading. And obviously, with him out right now, they are struggling mightily. So, can the Wizards break this 13-game losing streak? You'll find out tonight. 9 p.m. is the tip time here on the East Coast as Dave and the Wizards are out in Utah. Pregame 8:45, all here on the Team 980. Dave, have a great call, sir, and I'm hoping to see you Wednesday night and swing by the booth for Wednesday's game as you guys finally return home to Capital One Arena.
Inside warm Capital One Arena, but again, this is a Hoffman show exclusive. I can't even talk now. I'm so cold.
Dave, get inside.
Degrees right now.
We're
so
good.
Get on the bus.
Go. Time to get on the bus. All right. Thank you, sir. Defrost, and we'll see you on Wednesday. That is Dave Johnson with us here on the Hoffman Show, sacrificing the tips of his fingers, the bridge of his nose, but thankfully the pipes still work just fine. You'll hear him tonight starting at 8:45. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, the NFL and the NFLPA are in negotiations to go to 18 games in the regular season. Good idea? Bad idea? Great idea? Terrible idea? We'll chop it up next. show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, I think I'm out of show shape.
You're tired? You're fatigued?
I'm tired and fatigued.
Well, welcome back, Craig.
Thank you. I'm tired and fatigued. I'm hungry. My voice is we're getting there. You take the week off. Like, you come back refreshed, and I was just unprepared.
I got some bad news for you, Craig.
What's that?
We got to do this 4 more times this week.
Here's the thing, though. Have you looked at the schedule?
I have, and I know 3 of the next 4 days we're getting off at 6:45.
We are. So we would be wrapping up the show now. It's all right. We're going to make it till the end. We're going to entertain you out there listening and watching all the way till 7 o'clock like the professionals that we are.
Yeah.
We got a weird couple of weeks ahead.
Yes.
Because we got
March
this
Madness,
week,
baby.
Yeah, this week it's just regular stuff. We got some Maryland games. We got some Wizards are home Wednesday and Friday, so we're off the air a little bit early. Give way to Dave and Glenn. But then next week, we'll see where Maryland winds up at the Big Ten tournament. Hoyas, I think, one day in the Big East tournament. Obviously, if they keep winning, we'll see where they go. And then like on Friday, we're carrying one of the tournament championship games. So we're off at like 5:45.
Yeah.
So that's a mega short show. Then 2 weeks from now, we're not even on Thursday and Friday because we're carrying March Madness live here on the Team 980, first and second rounds of the NCAA tournament that weekend. But obviously, first round, the Thursday and the Friday, the games are happening while we would be on the air. Russell too. So. Sheehan will do his show in the morning all the way up until noon, and then games tip off, and then you'll get live play-by-play as you're driving around of all the NCAA tournament action here on the Team 980. So that's our next couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I should also remind folks that a week from today, probably be reacting to breaking news because the legal tampering. I mean, we will be reacting to breaking news. We'll see if it's Commanders breaking news because the legal tampering period, which is basically free agency. Yeah, like it's not – they can't sign till Wednesday, but all the news happens Monday, Tuesday.
Yep.
Schefter said it really well on McAfee today. He's like, by the time free agency opens, it's basically over because the legal tampering happens.
Yep.
You were about to say something.
No, I was just thinking back to the J.D. McKissick situation where, he signs with the Buffalo Bills, but
you never know.
He never put ink or pen to
paper.
To paper,
yeah. So it does happen very rarely, but basically all the news will happen a week from today, and we'll be on for. I do believe we get the full show next Monday.
Yes.
So on the days where we have to negotiate, what do we cut? That is not a day that I want to be negotiating, and so we don't have to worry about that. All right, NFL and NFLPA are. I saw Z tweeting about this. I'm sure he has thoughts. If you'd like to share them on a radio show, that can get written up and quoted or across the nation, he's more than welcome here anytime. But that the NFL and the NFLPA are negotiating because the NFL wants to add an 18th regular season game, and the reason is very simple. They could make bukus of money off of this. They go to their TV partners and they're like, "Hey, 18th game, we need more money out of you." It creates more inventory. The ad sales on NFL games are clearly doing very well. And I think the TV partners are also probably pushing for this because there is no TV product that does better than, and especially live, than NFL football. Certainly shows like, The Voice or some of the Chicago Fire and Med and, CSI, insert whatever city they're doing now. Like all those shows do okay, but I think a lot of people watch those on demand now, or they're more able to watch them on demand. Or football, is the thing that everybody still watches live. People watch games back sometimes, but that's nerds like me who have to do that for a job, or nerds like you listening who are super fans of the team and they're like, I know I want to watch that game again, or I had to miss it because of X, and I can't miss my favorite team's game because I want to be involved in the discussion. But 90+% of people who are watching football are watching it live, and that's how they interact with the sport on CBS, Fox, Amazon on Thursdays, ESPN on Mondays, et cetera, et cetera. And so for players, they have to decide, well, is the current 48% of that revenue that we would get, is that worth it for us? And especially if like some of these business entities that are tied to the NFL are gambling, it's another game to gamble on, so there's more revenue to be had there. Is it worth the damage on our bodies to play an 18th regular season game? And it's a tough call, I would imagine, for the players who are trying to make as much money as they can. Because, like, you know, you have to make that calculation. It's like, what is it really doing to my career? Is this going to cut a whole year off my career? Well, if not, I'd rather make that more money now. If I'm going to play 9 years, like, let's make the most money I can in those 9 years. But I think the other part of it, Ant, that I think of with the NFL that I wonder, actually, I wonder about this with the NBA and their schedule too, when I've argued in the past that they should shorten it, is the other thing you can sell is scarcity. And the more the NFL expands, the less scarcity it is. The less every game feels special. And like, this is the magic of college football. If you're a top contender, or it used to be the magic of college football, if you're a top contender and you lose one game, you're out. So every game carries that importance. Now with the playoff, it's not quite that much, but I think still is going to be really super competitive. If you lose, you're going to have some of those, probably more teams that you're fighting against that second loss, and it's going to create that scarcity. And in the NFL, the more games there are, the less important each one is. And I think that's the magic of football sometimes, is there's a scarcity of it. It leaves you craving for it. And if you just get it all the time and there's more of it, I don't know that that's actually in the long term better for business. Nevertheless, the health and player safety implications that all these players are thinking about, which are 1,000% legit and more important.
Yeah, that's exactly where my attention shifts to, just player safety. Like, already 16 games was already, grueling and taxing on the body. So you add the 17th game, and that's crazier. And now you're talking about adding an 18th game. So the only thing I would suggest is, changing the calendar a little bit. So maybe you can, flip
You got a second bye now?
Yeah, you got a second bye, or you even do the Pro Bowl game like halfway through the season kind of thing, and give everybody a bye like the following Sunday or something. I don't know. I just know the schedule would adjust, and you will have to do it to a point where you're looking out for the players.
Yeah, to me, if you want 18, it's like, all right, well then let's get rid of Thursday Night Football, which they're never going to do. Why? Because Amazon pays literally $1 billion a year, I think, for Thursday Night Football. Like, they're not getting rid of Thursday Night Football. But that's the thing, is the NFL is so greedy, and people eat it up. Like, this is capitalism, is people eat it up, and so they just continue to, like, more, yep, and more, and yep. Because, like, what's next? They're not going to stop at 18 games. Like, they will for now, but then what?
Like, they literally just added the 17th game.
Right.
A couple of seasons ago.
Right. I still screw up records. Like, when I'm talking, the Commanders will go 10-6 this year. It's like, no, they won't, because they play 17 games. Like, I still don't have 17 numbers in my head of what a good and a bad record is and what it means to win 10 games or 9 games or whatever. You're about to add another one? This is really why I hate this, Anthony, because I suck at math.
But the thing is, like, when they shifted from 14 to 16, it was 16 for a long period of time. So I think I think they would stop at 18.
They would stop for a while, but
for a while.
They stopped at 16 but added Thursday night.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, at some point, there was a night, like, I feel like my childhood, it was 16 and it was consistent. There was no Thursdays outside of, Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But, they chip away. And I do wonder what's next. Because also the other thing with 18 games is, are you now opening yourself up to expansion? Do you add another team and there's more room in the repertoire or in the calendar for more teams to play each other? So do you add that too? And like, what do you feel like the league is deep enough for that to happen? We're looking at a 34 team NFL. That feels outrageous.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's impossible either. Just keep growing that money pot.
Good question.
Everyone that's the thing. At the end of the day, it involves people getting paid more.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the people involved in the negotiations, and I know that there actually is some complications with the CBA and et cetera, and, obviously the two sides can always just agree to it. But if the people involved are ultimately going to get paid more money, things get done. That's kind of how it goes. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, we'll wrap up the show, and got some good stuff on Real Things Real People Said into Real Microphones. Did Kirk Cousins give a hint about his future in a message to Grant and Danny? What? You'll hear it next. Team 980. Although, admittedly, right now, Anthony, the YouTube stream is glitching up at the end here on us. Not really sure what's going on with that. Always good, but it just crashes out at the end of the show. Really fun times. We got a whole bunch of stuff for Real Things Real People Said into Real Microphones. So I say, Anthony, we're going to have a great show tomorrow. Lynette will be on. We'll do other fun stuff. But let's get right to it, shall we? It is time for Real Things.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
Alrighty then. I promised this one right before the break. Did Kirk Cousins secretly drop a hint about his future in a message to Grant and Danny a couple weeks ago? The guys across the hall celebrated their 10th anniversary at the end of actually, it was the beginning of last month. God, I can't believe it was a month ago already. It was like right before the Super Bowl. And Kirk Cousins, who obviously was on their show for years, helped build that show into the behemoth that it was, because they were must listen for the Kirk interview each and every week, if not for all of their great analysis. Said, like, he's definitely not disinterested in coming back to DC. Love it when the music player doesn't work. Might need you, Anthony. You got it? All right, Anthony's going to play the soundbite. That was not a fine for me. That was a computer malfunction. Anthony, Kirk Cousins.
Grant and Danny, this is Kirk Cousins. Just wanted to reach out and say congratulations for 10 years on the air together. I was so lucky to get to be a small part of it for 3 football seasons. I miss you guys. Julie and I both miss you. And who knows, maybe someday we'll boomerang back and I'll be able to finish my career there in D.C. and we can do another season of call-ins after games. Blessings, guys.
Well, I mean, maybe. But he's probably like, let me get one more bag real quick first.
I'm about to say, man, he would have to definitely be walking away from a lot of money if he was coming.
I mean, they could pay him a lot of money.
They could pay
here.
him, but would you?
I don't think they will.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Funny bit over the weekend from JJ Redick, who's now part of the #1 team at ESPN for their NBA coverage, with Doc Rivers departing to attempt to coach the Milwaukee Bucks. They're doing a little bit better as of late, post All-Star. Anyway, they were calling a game with the Nuggets, which met Nikola Jokic, and Mike Breen got a little carried away talking about how much Nikola Jokic loves passing, and JJ had to bring him back in.
Oh, I didn't know your computer was entirely down.
No, my computer is on the fritz, bro.
Oh, my bad. Wow.
And I can try to pull it up, but
my bad.
Oh, actually, you know what? The computer's working now. That still is your fault, because I don't know why you thought the computer would magically fix itself. But guess what? You were right, Anthony. It did. So here's JJ Redick.
As much as nothing makes him happier than making a great pass to one of his teammates, nothing makes him more upset than a bad pass.
Horses, Mike. Horses make him happier than anything.
That is correct. Sometimes I feel like as sports broadcasters, we get carried away with the sports. That is correct. There is nothing that makes Nikola Jokic happier, not than passing, but than horses. Other big basketball story this weekend. Caitlin Clark passed Pistol Pete Maravich as the NCAA's all-time leading scorer at the Division I level. Something Kevin Durant saw the first time he ever saw Caitlin Clark play.
I remember watching her summer going into her senior year. I was in Chicago for 3 days for the Girls AAU Nationals. I happened to see the 17 on the girls, and she was in the championship. Her team from Iowa, I figure a few of those girls on her team now. But they played together so smooth, but she was always leading that. She always had the ball in her hands. Everybody was playing off of her. She just commanded the whole game. I was like, who the hell is this? She is nice. It was like, oh, she's the best player in the country. I was like, oh, damn. I see it now. Right. Like when you walk in and you don't even know who anybody is, and they just be like, yo, that's the best player in the country right there. It's just like, yo, that hit you out of nowhere. Like, let me really focus in on her. And I started following her career, and she stayed at home in Iowa, and last year she was killing too. And her and Paige went at it. Man, them girls they showing some stuff out there, like from a skill standpoint, creativity standpoint, that is just like, it's hard to deny that.
Yeah, what Clark's doing is nuts. And the thing about Caitlin is she just delivers every time. Like, she's a big game player. Like, even last year in the title game, the refs took her out of that game, but she was still incredible against LSU. And if the refs don't do it, like, does Iowa win that game? Does she have a national title? Does that change the GOAT conversation? All that stuff. The answer is no. It's Maya Moore or it's Brianna Stewart.
Exactly. I was about to say,
Or
it's
if you want to go
Maya
back
Moore.
and the NCAA era.
Okay, that's fair.
But, like,
that's
I
fair.
will also say this. I'm going to tell the story real quick. So, when I worked down in Dallas, that is where Nancy Lieberman lives, who's one of the greatest women to ever play the sport. She's one of the greatest players ever to play the sport. And Nancy, at this point, is probably in her 50s. And as counselors, which I was helping coach the camp, we would play pickup for the kids as like at their lunch break, which was always fun because it was also our lunch break. So we had to like kind of ration how much we ate at lunch so we didn't puke playing pickup. But like, so it's me, and like I'm in my early mid 20s at the time. It's a bunch of other dudes who were mostly in their mid 20s, couple women who were kind of in that same age range. And like a lot of these people played at a decently high level or coached for a long time. And Nancy's out there in her 50s. And you know who the best player on the floor was? Nancy Lieberman.
Oh, my gosh.
She's still – because Nancy was like Magic Johnson. Like, her passing ability is insane. And she could still see the floor and manipulate people. She no-look dudes left and right. It was, like, unbelievable. Like, if you were on Nancy's team and she was still so competitive, like, that was the thing. Like, if she hit you with a pass in the hands and you weren't looking for it because you didn't know that she saw you, like, she'd let you know about it. She was unbelievable. And so I just can't imagine what she would have been like to play against when she was in her 20s. And so, like, this is why the GOAT stuff is so stupid, just to be blunt, across eras is, yes, it's different now. The nutrition, what we know scientifically, the air travel, especially for like NBA dudes. Like Will Chamberlain was having to scrunch into a coach seat in 1970s on air whatever as dudes smoked on the plane. Like, different life. But to pretend like the skill level, the athleticism, like there aren't translations is crazy, which is why you just like, who was the best player of that era? That dude or that lady was better than everyone else he or she played against. And I think for the 2020s, and really since like Stewie left college, Caitlin Clark's the best player I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
But Stewie won 4 national titles. I think Maya did too.
Now,
or she
Maya,
won 3.
Yeah, Maya got 3 because she lost to Stanford, I think it was.
Right. But like Maya was incredible. I mean, Maya was my era of college. Stewie was right after. She won 4 titles in 4 years. Hard to mess with that. CP was amazing. Taurasi, and like same thing on the men's side. Your GOAT depends on your era, but Caitlin Clark is certainly worthy of the conversation. All right, when we get back, it'll be tomorrow. We're gonna go on a break.